In 2003, Ronald D. Moore resurrected a camp sci-fi 70s TV show called Battlestar Galactica, but he made it darker, grittier, far more relevant to a paranoid post-9/11 culture. The conceit was simple. Artificially intelligent robots known as Cylons were created by man. The Cylons evolved to eventually look and sound human. They rebelled, wiping out most of the human race, with a few human survivors fleeing on spaceships in search of a new home. There are 12 different humanoid Cylon models. Some are known, some live amongst the human survivors in secret. And they have a plan. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and we discuss Ronald D. Moore's dark existential sci-fi odyssey, Battlestar Galactica. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 11th series, exploring the evolution of man-made monsters, and this is part 29. In this week's episode, we are tackling an epic 5-season television show. We are going to be talking about Battlestar Galactica, the show that began with a mini-series in 2003 and then was followed up by 4 full seasons leading up to 2009. This will be a spoilerific discussion. We will be trying to tackle this entire show, including its ending, within this discussion. So if you don't want to be spoiled on a show from 20 years ago, give it a watch, I guess, before you listen to this conversation. Although it may take you a while. There's a lot to get through, and there's a lot to discuss. I've tried this before a couple of times. We did an episode on Buffy. We've done an episode on the X-Files. It's always a challenge covering an entire TV show in one 2-hour discussion, but let's give it a damn good go. Joining me to discuss Battlestar Galactica, I've got 2 returning guests with me, both Battlestar Galactica fans. So first of all, a big hello to Alex Ayling. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. It's been ages. I'm trying to remember when you were last here. Was it to talk about Piranha?
That auspicious franchise. Yes, absolutely it was.
That classic.
Don't forget Piranha 3 Double D that we also talked about.
Absolute masterpiece. Exactly. Welcome back. And another big welcome to Ben Travis. Hello, Ben.
Hello.
Hello. How are you, Ben? Last time you were here was Bone Temple, so it's not been that long.
It's not been that long, no. But this is probably the longest I've ever prepared for a podcast. I've spent like 6 months rewatching Battlestar Galactica.
Yes, I know. We 3 booked this in like last summer, I think, right? We were like, right, the prep begins now. I've been so excited for this because this is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. It was one of the things that I've been most looking forward to talking about when I sort of announced this season. Let me just start off by asking you guys your own histories kind of with this show, with Battlestar Galactica. So, Alex, did you kind of watch this back in the day? When did you first discover this show?
What are we classing as back in the day? Is 2003 like back in the day now?
Absolutely. It's 23 years ago, Alex. It absolutely is.
Disgusting. Yes, I'm ashamed to say, or, I'm outing myself once again. For the age that I am, I watched it go out live. I have a really strong memory of watching it on Sky One. I can't remember which day it was. Maybe it was like Wednesdays at 8 p.m. But I didn't have what was called Sky Plus at the time, or whatever it was called back then, so I couldn't record it, so I had to watch it live. Ooh. And I remember I was in the living room, and then my girlfriend at the time was in the bedroom on the second TV that we had. Aren't we swanky? She was watching the OC because they were on at the same time on E4.
Oh my God, what a time!
And so that was how. I know, what time to be alive.
What a time.
So that's how we started. But then I managed to bring her over to my side. So from season 2 onwards, we were watching it together. Oh. But I watched it live. I didn't watch the miniseries.
No.
And then I went straight into season 1 and got very confused about one of the characters that seemed to be in 2 places at once for a while.
Right,
but
of course.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But you enjoyed it, I take it. Like, did the show grab you immediately at the time?
Absolutely loved it from the beginning. I mean, I do remember because obviously there was an original Battlestar Galactica in the 70s, and that used to be on, like, I think it was on like ITV on a Saturday afternoon in the like Knight Rider slot in the 80s or whatever. And so I remember that a little bit. And I remember actually my biggest exposure to it was in the opening credits of the A-Team, where there's a Cylon that walks past as a kind of like nod to the previous show.
Love that.
But yeah, so I was predisposed to sci-fi and TV, and so, but then I just got straight into it. Yeah.
Oh my God, incredible. Ben, what about you? Did you watch this at the time when it was going out?
No, I didn't. I watched all of this. I bought the box set. I've got the DVD box set at home, and I re-bought it on digital when I did this rewatch because I can't be faffing around with all the discs.
I know.
But I've got the full set, and so I watched it. It was all out. Controversial finale and all, and just liking geeky stuff. I just heard this show is amazing. But I think for me, a lot of these like sci-fi shows from that time that are just called name of ship all sound a bit generic. And so I bought this show kind of on faith, hearing that it was amazing. And I remember watching the mini-series and the start of season 1 and going like, oh, that's what this show is?
Right.
There's like the last tiny vestige of humanity running away from killer robots across space. This fucking rules. Yeah. Kraken rules. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
BSG lingo going.
My God, it's so true. And I think that's the thing that shocks. I mean, same here. I was similar to you, Ben. I came to it after the show had finished. I had heard about it as this kind of big deal. I remember it might have even been Empire magazine where they did one of those kind of greatest ever TV shows lists. And in amongst things like The West Wing and Buffy and Twin Peaks and The Sopranos was Battlestar Galactica. And I think it was a show that because of the original 70s version, because of its title, I sort of dismissed it for quite a long time as being like a bit of a naff sci-fi channel thing. And then I had exactly the reaction that I think everyone has when they first start watching it, which is, oh my God, this is so much darker and grittier than I was expecting. Alex, I got a funny message from a listener this week, actually, when we announced we were covering it.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, I've just dived into the first episode of the mini-season. Holy shit, a character has just snapped a baby's neck. This is not what I was expecting.
That is the exact moment when you lock in and you're like, this is what the show is. This is the places it is prepared to go. And that's not even the darkest thing that happens on this show, right?
No, exactly.
But it really laid its stall out from the beginning.
Holy shit. I mean, it's kind of too much to kind of give a plot synopsis. So what we'll probably do is kind of talk through plot points as we go. But it really goes hard, Ben, doesn't it, at the beginning? Like the fact that you're going to start your show with essentially the death of humanity, right? It's like, and the tone of it is so bleak and somber, isn't it?
Yeah,
right?
We begin and it's Judgment Day, Terminator 2 style, on Caprica is the planet, which is a sort of analog of Earth. And we basically just see like all of humanity get wiped out. And as you say, there's something about the massiveness of that is like almost incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But to then give you that moment of Caprica 6, the Cylon snapping a baby's neck, of just like, and you could read that moment in so many ways of, is it like a mercy killing ahead of this nuclear blast that is going to go off? I always wondered if it was like a moment of curiosity of like, ooh, these tiny puny humans, look how weak they are. Whoops. Oh no, I just killed a baby. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And you know, all the way through the show, there is this push and pull between, okay, well, what are the Cylons? What does it mean to be Cylon versus being human? What's the beef there in a big way? And it comes through in those little moments right from the beginning of the show. And also the massiveness of just like, okay, we have created these robots that are now totally wiping us out, and it's down to these last surviving humans to try and escape.
So what do you think, like Ronald D. Moore, when he created this kind of revival of the show, Alex, how much was this show kind of responding to the world and culture and where we were at the time, with that kind of really bleak nihilistic tone that it sets itself up with?
I think it's worth, I'm not going to do the whole plot, but I think it's worth saying, like, the backstory of where we join the characters are, in the past, they created these robots to help them. And they effectively became like a kind of slave underclass. And then the robots got intelligent enough and had a revolution. Then there was a war between the humans and the Cylons. Then the war came to an impasse, and the Cylons fracked off to the other side of the galaxy, and there's been nothing. No one's heard of them. And then when they come back, some of them now look like humans, and then they've come back and they're like, "No, we're ready. We waited 40 years, and now it's time to destroy the whole of humanity."
Yes.
And they basically do that. And to answer your question, I mean, I was watching. I wonder if it's different for me, because I was watching it in 2003 and 2004, which was at the height of the kind of invasion of Iraq in response to 9/11. You know, it had only been 2 years since 9/11, since the planes had flown into the two towers. And I think the thing that I always think about this show is, what if the shoe was on the other foot? What if it was America, the world's great superpower, that lost and then became the refugees and then were on the run? And that's always the lens that I've seen this show through, is like, what then? What and what does it mean from that? And then the more, you know, and I don't want to talk really about contemporary politics, but the more that I was watching on this rewatch and everything that's happening in the world right now, it has never felt more real. Like the phrase that they say in the show all the time is, "all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again," just hits you in the solar plexus every time, because it's so true. All of this is cyclical and things like that. But yeah, I saw this as a complete kind of allegory for that time in the world. The way that all the best sci-fi is.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Completely, I agree. And I guess, like Ben, also, yeah, the whole vibe of this, that sense of paranoia, because as we've mentioned, humanity is wiped out. The last remaining survivors flee on a group of spaceships into the depths of space. But of course, we have these human model Cylons that are living amongst the humans, right? So you don't know who to trust. You don't know who is going to, at any moment, blow up the ship that you're on or kill you or whatever. And so, as well as this absolute nihilism and destruction, there is this absolute sense of paranoia, right? And that is, for me, Ben, that's one of my favorite things about the show too, right? That idea of like, who can we trust here? You know?
Yeah, totally. And tying into, as you say, the sort of 9/11 of it all, this sense of like, we have been struck by an enemy that we didn't see coming, and now that total paranoia of like, when is the next strike? Where's the next hit coming from? There's an episode in season 1, it might even be like the first episode of season 1, where the Cylons are attacking every like 30 something minutes, every 33 minutes, and we have to keep jumping away, like sort of light speed jumping the ships effectively every 30 minutes before we get God. And you know, it's there, it's so kind of coded in the text of the show. This is early 2000 television, and you know, there is an element of like diverse-ish casting, and the same with The Lost was. It was like diverse yet also slightly tokenistic spread of ethnicities. As much as this is effectively humanity on the run, it's like Americans on the run. They all speak English effectively. It's a largely an American cast with a couple of sort of major exceptions. And so you have as well, not just the fact that this attack has left this group of survivors, but it then becomes clear of like, okay, we need a government on the Galactica, on the ships that are surviving. And so how is this government going to conduct itself, and how are we going to try and root out the Cylons that are hiding among us? And so it very quickly becomes this sort of political text about how America dealt with 9/11, is dealing with 9/11, is dealing with hunting out this enemy, is like trying to hold itself together as a nation in the wake of that, and how do we conduct ourselves? And I guess in the way that like The West Wing, which I will say I have never watched, but people talk about that as now reading like a piece of like a blissful fantasy politics of a rosier time.
It's almost too depressing to watch right now, actually, to be honest, because it's too utopian almost, you know?
Yeah. Like, Battlestar Galactica, there is darkness and there is cynicism there, but there is a kind of a handful of quite heroic characters who you believe will do the right thing and behave in honorable ways, even when the impulse is to react rashly and with violence and with fear.
There's hope.
And so again, as you say, like watching this now, it is both very timely, but also you feel like the government that would be created in the Galactica now maybe wouldn't be quite as admirable as President Brosnan and all of that lot.
But we get to explore populism.
Yes.
That's the other thing that I found on this rewatch is like it's so relevant to today. There's populism, like the kind of politics of that comes through.
There's religion. There's kind of evangelicals versus progressives, and
that's the other thing I'd say about the Cylons that we haven't mentioned is that they are pursuing. This is a religious war for them.
Yeah.
They're pursuing this war from their quote unquote one true God. So the humans have got a kind of what would you call it?
Multi-theocracy?
Polytheistic.
Yeah.
They believe in multiple gods. Basically, it's sort of Greek goddy. But the Cylons have one true God, which feels a bit more Judeo-Christianity, Islamic. That kind of Abrahamic religion.
Yes.
But they are. It's all of that is just baked in, and they don't shy away from it. Like that's the other thing that I really applaud this show for. Is it just goes there.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about it as we go. The religious element, ultimately, for some people, ends up being the show's downfall by the end as well, which is really interesting. And I think people are very divided on that. What a time for television. I mean, you did mention this just now, Alex, in terms of like what else, like your girlfriend was watching while you were watching this. But Ben, like, if we go back to 2003, 2004... 24, The West Wing, Lost obviously started in 2004. This was the first kind of golden era of HBO too. We were in the midst of shows like 6 Feet Under, The Sopranos, The Wire, Sex and the City. Was this television's first kind of big golden age, would you
I think
say?
it was. And I think it was in a way that almost at the time wasn't necessarily notice. I think it was even not that much further forward, but like a couple of years later, there was a hindsight of like, oh, there is incredible, deep, rich storytelling, complex storytelling happening on TV. For me, this time absolutely is Lost. Like that was the first show that I really watched week in, week out as it aired. And I think there are a lot of similarities with Battlestar Galactica as well, especially the way in which, as you say, the religious themes and how you have a show that is, on the one hand, a sort of sci-fi adventure show, but then really embraces religion, fantasy, belief systems, and ties that in a way that is totally inextricable from the sci-fi, to the extent that I think half of the original audience goes, I didn't sign up for any of this mumbo jumbo. I'm not into this anymore. But I think it really works in Battlestar Galactica because there is, we're talking about this in a horror context. There is a total like existential quandary to this entire show. It is like humanity is on the run. If we don't escape on these ships, humanity is totally done. The Cylons are wrestling with the fact that they were created by us and then just immediately screwed over by us and sort of placed into servitude. And then you have all of these characters, because the Cylons or certain Cylons are disguised as humans. You have so many characters in this who at some point wonder if they're a Cylon. They don't know if they're human or not. Some of them discover they are Cylons and have to reckon with, like, I am not fundamentally the being that I thought I was, and what does that mean for me? And so there is like an existential horror baked into this that is both extremely tied to the sci-fi of it, but also totally tied to the religious themes that come through.
Completely. Alex, what do you think of this? This wasn't HBO. It wasn't a network show, right? This was a cable sci-fi channel show, which I'm assuming probably means it was probably a slightly lower budget show than maybe some of those other things that were on, like Lost, for example, at the time, which was so
100%.
kind of glossy, right? Do you see that? Does it have kind of constraints? Does it feel like it is a low budget show when you watch it?
So at this time, I was working in cable television in the UK. And so I was, I was in the milieu of it the whole time. So I was sort of seeing it from like not a quasi insider thing. And I think that the thing you have to remember is that I think the term peak TV was coined in around 2008, 2009, and it still grew after that, right? But we were very much on the up at this point. So when you talked about 24, The West Wing. I guess ER was an early proponent of this, of like high quality network television. And then you had HBO, and then that was sort of it. And then you had the sci-fi channel, and occasional, like you had Bravo and a few other smaller channels that would do their own thing. That was more kind of reality. But the other thing to remember about this time is that advertising revenues were so much higher. So you could survive on a cable channel and have a modest budget, less than half of what you'd get on Lost, maybe like a third of what you'd have on Lost per hour. But you could get by because you knew your advertising revenue and your syndication revenue that you would get from selling it around the world would be enough to sustain these kind of series. And that's why I think eventually this show got a bit more expensive, and Sky, it was doing well on Sky, so Sky became like a co-pro, and you'd do other things like that. But this was very much on the up, and so I don't think a show like this would exist today. I think a concept like this, you'd demand a huge budget. It would go straight to streaming. It would be prestige. You'd get 10 episodes every 2 years. It would be like House of Dragon levels of like bringing it back, and you wouldn't get, like you said, the constraints is exactly the right word. Like, I love the creative constraints of this. I love the kind of, it's a bit hokey, and you sort of go with it. Like, I got it all on DVD, and then I've got the second half of season 4 on Blu-ray, and I was watching them on the Blu-ray, and there's a little sign that comes up on the Blu-ray that says, as Blu-ray is a new format, the high definition is going to show up some of the stylistic choices. These are intentional. So you get this little note, but the only thing I can think of now is like something of this sort of level of ambition. It reminds me of something like the OA on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that. Like, it's got that kind of breadth, but the amount of money that was pumped into that show made it untenable after 2 series, and they had to cancel it. Whereas this, because it was small and it wasn't on network television, so it's not living and dying by the weekly ratings, it's able to sustain itself on just the advertising revenue.
But also on a fundamental filmmaking level, how they did this and how they got away with having those low budgets is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
Like, the show, as much as some of the CGI Cylons, like the old style Cylons, the toasters, look pretty janky.
Yeah.
But they, again, in that early to mid 2000s style, this is like as shaky cam as a Jason Bourne movie. And they use that both to give this sense of like documentary verite, that you are like in the situation with these characters. There's an urgency to the camera work. That when our characters are in these massive sets, they built a couple of like really strong core sets that they just reuse. They walk up and down the same corridor a million times from 10 different angles. But you're constantly like having these tiny little zooms in while characters are having conversations. And then when you cut to the Vipers launching into space, the sort of individual one-man spaceships, they use the same shaky cam, quick zoom sort of camera style that masks over so much of what must be fairly ropey CGI if they just present it in these beautiful, clean shots.
Right.
But because you are given the perspective of a camera struggling to keep up with tracking this ship that's just blasted out from the Galactica, it looks and feels verite, and that is such a clever way of making this series for like 50p an episode and just about getting away with it from week to week.
Well, it is big. It's a big world, right, that it has to introduce in that initial miniseries. And let's talk a little bit about the miniseries and how this story begins. Because as well as we've mentioned, this idea of Cylons kind of blowing up the 12 planets, and so we have this huge like genocide that the story starts with. We also have the Battlestar Galactica out in space, right? And it's in orbit. And Alex, that first, I think it is post-credits, the first shot we get, which is this beautifully long
one-er.
It's a one-er, isn't it? It's a long tracking shot where we are introduced to a lot of characters, and that's the other thing about this that reminds me a bit of Lost and some of the other shows from this era. This isn't a small cast of like 3 characters. It's huge. And so that opening, not just the opening miniseries, but the opening shot of the miniseries introduces us to like Commander Adama and Starbuck and Chief Tyrrell and all of these characters that we get in that astonishing one-er, right? I mean, it is incredibly directed, I think, isn't it?
It reminds me of another thing we've talked about on your podcast, which is that corridor scene in Donnie Darko, where they go down the corridor and they see all the different characters, and you get a sense of everyone's relationship to one another.
Design more readily apparent than on board the world-famous Battlestar Galactica. This ship, the last of her kind still in service, was constructed over 50 years ago during the early days of the Cylon War. Now, originally, there were 12 Battlestars, each representing one of Cobalt's 12 colonies. Galactica represented Caprica. It was first commanded by Commander Dash. He was indeed a very
war is long over. You must not forget the reasons why.
Commander Adama, if I may.
Captain, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it's been serving with you on your command, sir.
Captain Kelly, it's been my honor. Good luck in your next assignment.
Thank you, sir.
The Cylon War is long over, yet we
Morning,
must not
sir.
forget. Good morning, Starbuck. What do you hear?
Nothing but the rain.
Grab your gun and bring in the cat.
Boom, boom, boom.
Attention. Auto guard detail report to starboard hangar bay for ceremonial briefing and rehearsal.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. And the Battlestar Galactica itself as a set, like Ben was talking about the set, the thing that I think is really clever about that feeling janky as well is like the only reason that is the ship that survives is because it's so old.
Yeah.
It's so old. It's basically about to be turned into a museum, and they're at the kind of like sending it off to live on a farm upstate. And because it doesn't have the new computers and the new networking, it is not susceptible to the virus that the Cylons unleash and drop all of the defenses. So the mere fact of its kind of decrepitude and its like not keeping up is the thing that saves it, and then that can then play into the kind of set design and it plays even into the narrative as the series goes on, as it starts to fall apart because it wasn't built to keep going at this pace.
It gives you that like Star Wars used universe thing where everything just feels a bit grubby and a bit shit.
Yes.
And but it makes it feel
more
real.
Aliens.
Yes.
And actually, a TV show from the same year, Firefly, as well, did that same thing, right?
Yeah.
Where you get this feeling that this ship is kind of a bit old and janky, but it has so much character and so much personality, right?
And the fact of including. It's not just the military top brass who are your main characters. You've got people on the decks who are fixing the ships, and you've got Chief Tyrrell and Callie down there and you've got all the pilots, and you've got a little bit of seeing throughout the ship. It's not just you're not just on the bridge, with the executive class. And I sort of love that for understanding how everybody's responding to this. Like you say, this genocide. Like it's striking to me. Like at the beginning of every episode, you get a number.
Yes.
This is how many humans are left in the galaxy, and then every episode it goes down. Sometimes by like a few, sometimes by a couple of thousand, and then there's one episode where it goes up by one because a baby's born, and you're like, oh my god, the number.
Yeah, I know, unbelievable. And I think that's right. Like there is this feeling of like when we're on the Battlestar, we're in a place of safety, but yet this like absolute atrocity is happening down on the planets and outside of this world. And we meet these characters that are like you said, Ben, that there are these kind of safety net characters that have this real sense of kind of right and wrong. Let's start with talking about Commander Adama, shall we? Like played by Edward James Olmos. Really, he's like top build star for this show. Ben, what do you think of him? How important is this character of Adama in kind of centering this entire show?
Oh, he's so important. He is like a tough son of a bitch, and sometimes he's like too military for his own good, and he's a bit like closed off, but then always by the end of the episode you see this like beating heart underneath him, and he is like a physical embodiment of the Galactica itself. He's been through the wars, he is all busted up on the outside, but he's still ticking on in the inside, and he becomes this like real focal point of the show because he becomes the guy who you always trust to eventually do the right thing and to persevere against all odds. And so then there are times where it feels like Adama's lost his hope, and that's when you really feel as an audience member of like, oh god, we're so fracked. We're so fracked. If Adama crumbles, humanity as a unit dies. So there's a lot weighing on his shoulders, and it's an incredible performance. There's such a warmth to him, even though he's a character who, especially as we meet him, he's lost one of his sons, and he has then a very fractious relationship with his other son, Lee Adama, Apollo, and so there are very kind of clear reasons why in some ways he's closed off, and yet at the same time he is so in touch with his crew and with the sense of military command and with his ship. They are all one and the same.
And he takes it so seriously. Like he seems like a good boss. You know, all these people are very loyal to him. And then there's one episode where he is he's doing this mantra, and you can't really understand what the mantra is, but the mantra is he's trying to remember everybody's names. He's trying to remember the names of the people who bring him the coffee. This is the person who's on the con, and he knows who everybody is on the ship. And yeah, he is absolutely the heart of
He's
the show.
incredible. You love him more and more and more as the show goes on, don't you? As this kind of patriarchal kind of figure almost, but such a loving, warm one. And Edward James Olmos is just so good because he has that kind of he's slightly aged, he's slightly croaky, slightly craggy, but again, there's a magic in his eyes as well at the same time, isn't there?
He's lived a life.
And again, one of the very first characters that kind of he comes across in that opening one is Starbuck, right? Who is running laps around the corridors. Starbuck, who was played by a man in the original series, I believe, and has been kind of recast here. Starbuck. Alex, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Starbuck as a character.
Oh, you would have missed the Ferrari when it was announced, and Starbuck's a woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Starbucks. They've ruined it already before it's even started. It's gone. I don't think we'd invented the word woke at this point, but this show's too woke. So all of this stuff has happened before. It will all happen again.
There we go.
Yeah, and. Starbuck, incredible! What an incredible performance that is, and it's so easy to see the tough guy, the woman being the tough guy, trying to fit in with the men as a pilot, but she is fully embracing her entire personality. This in the original Battlestar Galactica, it's. He's smoking a cigar and he's a ladies' man and he's all suave and whatever else. And Starbuck is so fracked up. She's so broken and barely holding herself together the whole series. And yet is the best pilot in the galaxy, is loyal, is disloyal, is allowed to be all of those things. And I think that's, she's not a one-trick pony. It's not a one-note character. No. I love her.
I think as well. I think that's the thing. Ben, Starbuck is kind of really emblematic of the show as a whole because she's a pretty flawed, morally grey character. She does a lot of bad shit, doesn't she, in this? And I think it introduces that idea of the moral, the greyness of this entire universe and all these characters, right?
Yeah, totally. And she, especially as we meet her, she is held together by whiskey and vibes. As you say, she is an incredible pilot, but she's also just a total frack up and is caught up in all of the Adama family grief as well. She was with Commander Adama's son who died, Zach, but also always really fancied Lee, the brother, and so there's this kind of awkward family love triangle, but one of the corners of the triangle has died, and so everybody's deeply messed up.
And also, she might be slightly responsible for his death because she cleared him to fly because she was with him, but he probably wasn't ready.
And also, Admiral Adama, or Commander Adama, is her father almost, and he keeps calling her his daughter, so it's all very strange and incestuous, that whole thing. Yeah.
And then over the course of the show as well, she is sort of emblematic of the show because her story and her essence basically becomes more and more tied into the sort of religious fantasy element of the show.
Mythology.
And so she starts as this character who is very down-to-earth survivalist crack pilot hotshot, and then over the course of the show becomes more and more tuned in to whatever theological stuff is happening out there in the galaxy. And so she is an incredible character, and one, as you say, right from the beginning, she isn't one note, but she becomes like a whole symphony over the course of this entire show. She's incredible.
There is, and also this idea that Alex, I think what it does with sort of gender is really interesting in this show, right? Like, there's a kind of androgyny, I suppose, to the characters on Battlestar Galactica and just generally in this world, in this society, the way in which, like, just little things like they will call women in power sir, for example, and like all of these like little things that there is this kind of beautiful mesh, isn't there, of all types, of all genders, of all sexuality. We're in a world where it feels like that almost just doesn't really matter in Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, but it's not, but it's also not a post-prejudicial society. Like there is racism, but it's not racism in the way that we experience it. Like the racism is not based on the color of your skin; it's based on the planet you're from. So everybody's like taking the piss out of the Pycons because they all do this, and they don't believe in, they don't believe in medicine or whatever it is. There's something, and so it's absolutely not that it's a non-prejudicial society. It's just using that thing that sci-fi can get to do, which is like show a different side of things, show a reflection of like a dark mirror on our world, and use a different way as like I said before, like an allegory. But yeah, because it's like I don't read a lot of sexism. There's a little, but also it's not post-gender world either. Like people are using their sexuality as a weapon. People are trying to jumping around each other's bunks the whole time.
Oh my god, it's a very horny show, actually, isn't it? Like they are all at it the entire time throughout this series. I love it. We don't have time, sadly, to go through all of these amazing characters that we meet on Battlestar Galactica. But do we have any particular favourites, Ben? I mean, for me, it's Saul Tigh, it's Colonel Tigh, maybe the show's biggest bastard, right? I love him. I couldn't give a frack, Bill.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Commander Adama is essentially like a lovable grizzled guy, it's in comparison to Saul Tigh, who is like so grizzled and such a dickhead for so much of the show.
Awful.
He's an awful man, but we kind of love him as well. We love him because he's Commander Adama's best friend, and we know there's got to be some good in him if he's mates with Adama. I mean, there's loads of great characters in this. I think the best character in the show is somebody who we're going to talk about a little bit down the line. I will just say, for me, this show is a total tie of like some of the best characters ever on TV and a bunch of characters who I cannot stand.
Yes!
I am a total Chief Tyrrell hater.
Me too.
I hate Callie.
Me too. This is why, Ben, you've got the best opinions. I always appreciate your opinions. Mike does not agree, by the way. We've been texting.
So whiny and annoying. Get them out the airlock.
I really like Chief Tyrrell. I don't like Callie. She's one of my least favourites. But I think Chief Tyrrell, again, all these characters are fucked up in different ways. The character I really find the most boring, I suppose, in that he kind of is the most pure. He's the Jack from Lost, is Apollo, is Lee Adama. Because he's the... Yeah. I think I prefer the characters that are bastards in this. So I love Starbuck. I quite like Tyrrell. I really love Saul Tigh. Apollo is just the good-looking all-round... He's the hero. He's the good guy.
He's so beige, though.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Like, super and beige. In the Jack from Lost thing, like, beige hero with daddy issues.
Exactly. We don't need more of that. Thank you very much.
Well, you've always got to have one.
You've always got to have one. No offense to Jamie Bamber. And to be fair, Apollo does some interesting things as it goes on with regards to kind of his sort of political head and sometimes how he can bump up against the military for that reason and stuff. So he gets to do some fun stuff, but he's very pure. He's the kind of moral center, isn't he, of the show, I suppose. But let's talk about some of the other really interesting characters. Maybe we should start by talking about the first Cylon that we meet. Opening scene of the miniseries, we see the slightly janky toasters, the Centurion robot, and then we see this very sexy blonde woman strutting towards the camera, right? Who is, as it turns out, one of our humanoid Cylons. And before she kills the man, she kisses him and she says, "Are you alive?" Right? And she's the one who, as we've mentioned, also goes on to snap a baby's neck on screen in the miniseries. So she is clearly incredibly deadly, but she has this kind of curiosity about her, right? And this obsession with humans and what it means to be alive. Played by Tricia Helfer. We never learn her name. She is referred to as number 6 because she's the 6th model in the 12 Cylon models. What do we think of her, of number 6, Alex, and her importance in this show?
I just think it's absolute genius. Extraordinary performance. You can see why she was hired, right?
Oh,
you can see
she's unbelievable. Yeah,
like this. So she was a model, right? And so they hired her, and they probably thought, we'll put a few scenes in. We're going to make the Cylon sexy. That's probably what sold. That's probably what sold the pitch to.
Yeah, it almost looks a bit.
NBC.
It almost looks a bit Species or something, doesn't it? Like they put her on the posters.
Totally.
She,
she's always front and
deadly
center.
Blonde.
Yeah, exactly, and it's that whole trope. And then, she's always mostly naked, which she's obviously very comfortable with being because she's a model. And so, she's very used to using her body in that way as a kind of to hang clothes off or to express herself in that way. And so there's a lot of sex scenes at the beginning, just sidebar. I feel like if you were trying to blend in with humanity when you're having sex, maybe your spine shouldn't glow red. I'm just saying. It's a bit of a giveaway.
I feel like that only happens in the first season, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and then they
were
away with
this
that.
Is probably a bit of a giveaway. Because there were lots of other Cylons that end up having sex. Anyway.
Yes.
I think she's an extraordinary actor.
I can't die. When this body's destroyed, my memory, my consciousness will be transmitted to a new one. I'll just wake up somewhere else in an identical body.
You mean there's more out there like you?
There are 12 models. I'm number 6.
Because by the end of the show, she has played probably 7 or 8 different characters, and they're all distinct. And some of them look exactly the same. Some of them have got a bit of a different hair color. But even that, beyond the costume and the makeup and the hair, the comportment, the way that she is walking into a room, you can tell which of the versions of 6 she is at any moment. And I just and I think she's fascinating because the 6 that we see most is actually not even a real version of 6. It appears in the imagination of Baltar, that a person that I hopefully will talk about soon. So there's that, and then there's the other versions, and then there's horrible versions, and then she gets some of the grimmest storylines as well, like the on the Pegasus, when we get to that, the Gina version, oh my God. I just think what an incredible invention of a character that you can have. You can play multiple versions. It's obviously been done loads in film and TV before, but it's never, for my money, it's never been better than number 6.
I agree. I think the best performance in the whole show, probably. And I think some people dismiss her almost because she's just she's the blonde sexy one or whatever. But what an astonishing thing, Ben, that she was this model, but also turned out to be what an incredible versatile performer that she gets to be in this show.
Yeah, as you say, over the course of this and the more iterations of 6 that Tricia Helfer gets to play, she really gets to play lots of different notes. It's a character who, when we first meet her, I'm still quite conflicted on, and I would love to know from female fans of the show how they feel about this character, because I do think the show sort of has its cake and eats it too in being an early 2000s sci-fi TV show that's hey, we got a sexy robot lady. And totally. At the same time, it's so inherent to that character, and especially the context that we see 6 in, particularly early on, the sexuality of that character, the overt sexuality, is such an important facet of it, because it's so tied to the character of Gaius Baltar and what he represents and the role that he has played in the Cylon attack. And so you have a character who is undeniably sexualized, but there is a real purpose often to that sexualization, whilst at the same time this is early 2000s TV. I really hope Tricia Helfer did feel comfortable with lots of these scenes, because she is easily like one of the actors on this show who is not wearing many clothes for a lot of, especially the early run. And I think there are so many facets to that character that it makes for a really interesting discussion on the ways in which the show uses those elements of the character to some really sort of interesting and thought-provoking ends, and the ways to which it possibly is slightly exploitative of that at the same time.
Totally. I completely agree. It's a really interesting thing. When we talked about the kind of interesting, kind of fluidity almost of some of the characters, the human characters, with this character, it is so unbelievably male-gazy, sexy woman, kind of coded, particularly at the beginning. But as you said, Ben, the point is that she's kind of been built this way for a reason, right? And there is this incredible moment. She's established in the opening scene as this deadly Cylon who has blown up a ship and killed people. And then the next time we meet her, she's walking into a man's apartment, right? And she's clearly in a relationship with this guy who we are introduced to as Gaius Baltar, played by James Callis. And he is this, how do we describe him, Alex? He is this kind of rich, arrogant tech bro, right?
Yeah, and I can't think of any of those these days. That this could possibly be
the Elon Musk energy
ahead of its time. Honestly, like he absolutely is in that mold, right? He is one of the people that you'd see at the front of the queue when it comes to the inauguration. He was in that front line. Like he'd own one of these big networks, but he's also like he doesn't want to run anything. Like I was never clear what his job was. Everybody seems to know him. Like he's famous. Like everybody knows who Dr. Gaius Baltar is. Like even normal people, even before the show, even before it kicks off. So he's got a profile, but I don't know like if he owned a tech platform or whatever else. But yeah, he's a genius.
He's a computer genius.
He actually is a genius, and more than that, he is also a political genius, and he is extremely good at self-preservation and understanding what he needs to do to maintain his own life and how he can manipulate the entire fate of humanity around whether he lives or dies and what he gets to do and how he gets his rocks off. And so, yeah, I just think what a really fascinating character that goes on just such an interesting journey throughout the series.
Yeah, he represents humanity's kind of absolute dogged kind of determination to live, right, and prevail. Ben, is Gaius Baltar the best character on this show?
Best character on the show. He's a total piece of shit, and I absolutely love him. And they relish how much of a piece of shit he is. That he is like the very dregs of humanity, our like most base instinct to, as you say, to survive at all costs, to self-preserve at all costs, to seek pleasure at all costs, even at the downfall of other people. He is like horny and wretched and the smartest guy in the galaxy, and also a total like fuck up again. And he can't help himself in any situation. You're screaming at the TV because you're like, what are you doing? And the downfall of humanity comes from the fact that he is sleeping with the Cylon number 6, who he does not know is a Cylon. Gives her access to all of the human mainframe stuff, which means that they can blow up Caprica. So it couldn't be more his fault that this genocide has happened.
Yeah.
If you're a Cylon, prove it to me right now.
I don't have to. You know I'm telling the truth.
See, stating something as the truth doesn't necessarily make it so, because the truth of the matter is, I don't believe a word of it.
You believe me because deep down you've always known there was something different about me. Something that didn't quite add up in the usual way. And you believe me because it flatters your ego. To believe that alone among all the billions of people of the 12 colonies, you were chosen for my mission.
Your mission? What mission?
You knew I wanted access to the defense mainframe.
Wait a minute. The defense mainframe? What exactly are you saying?
Come on, guys. The communications frequencies, deployment schedules, unlimited access to every database.
Oh my God. I had nothing to do with this. You know I had nothing to do with this.
You have an amazing capacity for self-deception. How do you do that?
And then, when humanity escapes, everybody's like, thank God Gaius Baltar's here. He's the genius. Yeah. He's the one who's going to save us all. Meanwhile, all he cares about is shagging anything that moves. But also, among all of this, he might be like chosen by God to have prophetic visions. He sees a version of Six in his mind's eye who talks to him, and he converses with out loud. So he's also always talking to himself, but he's actually talking to a manifestation of Six in his head. But also the manifestation of Six seems to have some corporeal abilities to manipulate him physically in the real world. And it's a constant question in the show of what is that Six in his head? What is going on with Baltar? Has he been chosen? Is this some religious intervention? And if it is a religious intervention, why Gaius Baltar of all people?
Yeah.
So it's this incredible mix of like, he is the absolute best and the absolute worst of humanity all rolled into one. And from episode to episode, you don't know what the hell this guy is going to do and what kind of scrapes he's going to get himself out of.
He's an incredibly ahead of his time character, I think. If we said that the number 6 Cylon character feels a little bit early 2000s in the way she's portrayed, I think Gaius Baltar, as a character and what he represents, has aged like a fine wine, right? This like 100% egomaniac tech bro, this privileged, good-looking white guy who, no matter how many awful things he does, he just keeps getting away with it and keeps getting away with it, and he uses his charms and his wiles and his political nous and his, whatever, to slip through like a cockroach every time, doesn't he? And he's awful. He's snivelly and awful. But how good is James Callis as a performer as well? Because he it's a really difficult balance, right? Because it's not like he's so awful that you just don't want to watch him or be around him.
But he's so pathetic. He's such a little weasel.
Yeah.
And there is so much pathos to that performance. You just like, you almost, if he wasn't such a prick, you'd feel sorry for him because he's in so deep over his head. And so there is like a terrible, terrible humanity to that character. And you can't help but like, in some ways root for him because the odds are so stacked against him in every situation. You're like, nobody else could get away with this, but there has to be something like special about you, that you are the person who seems to slip through every single net. I said before as well, like the vast majority of the cast members here are American. James Callis is British. Classic, we'll cast the British guy as effectively the villain and get him to be very British and snooty and very posh sounding. He's
like a kind
great.
He's kind of like a junior sort of Jeremy Irons or Alan Rickman or something.
Yes,
he's like that kind of British villain vibe. Yeah. Alex, Ben mentioned this. There is this element in particularly in the first season that, like you said, Gaius has visions of this sexy Cylon number 6 in his mind, who is constantly telling Gaius, "You are important. You are chosen. You are important to the future of humanity." And again, like, I think there's a really interesting tension, isn't there? Particularly in the first season, where it's like, is this just an absolute narcissist egomaniac who really believes that he is chosen for something greater, How do you find that kind of the way that the show kind of pulls that stuff off?
Yeah, I always read it as that she was a figment of his imagination. And even when she appears to be giving him like new information that he doesn't have, I was assuming that was just his instincts and subconscious, like finding a way to tell him the kind of things that he is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And and like a way of visualizing, he's such a Machiavellian kind of plotter, but he doesn't have a confidant. He doesn't have... He hasn't got like Varys and Littlefinger. There aren't two of them, from Game of Thrones, like whispering to each other. He hasn't got anyone to talk to. He's on his own. And so you have to find a way, I guess, as a writer to express that sense. And so I've always, at the beginning, I always interpreted it as like she's a figment of his imagination. And then, as the series goes on, you find out that maybe there's more to it than that, actually. And maybe there's, and he starts to have, I think it's when he first gets to Kobol and he's like injured. We're skipping right the way to the end of season 1 now, but he's injured and he starts to have visions of this opera house, which becomes a really important, like, part of the theological kind of storyline that's going on. And this thing that I can imagine the writers putting in as like a very useful narrative crutch for how do we get the inner voice of this character who's so important, how do we express it, becomes then this thread that they pull on. And then by the end of the series, spoiler alert, it was real.
Yeah.
Like the whole time, like it was an angel that was talking to him,
yes.
that was giving him divine intervention, and there was there's an equivalent. There's a 6 that is seeing a guy as Boltar. That
is one of my favourite sort of reveals. That comes maybe a season or 2 in, when Caprica 6, as we get to know her, like the 6 who was on Caprica, who struck up that relationship with Boltar, she is seeing and hearing a version of Boltar in her head, who is also like this idealized sex object to her.
Yeah.
She's in love with him. He's in love with her. They're both having visions of each other. And to have those two as like mirrors of each other, again, is part of, to me, why the 6th character ends up being so great, because they kind of really flesh out and balance those scales and present that 6 in particular and Baltar as like mirrors of each other, and sort of these two halves of each other who both receiving divine intervention to the humans and to the Cylons to like manipulate this situation in what we get to understand is like a repeating loop of history that is just like an inevitability of humans will create, our creations will destroy us, we will flee, we will survive, we will evolve again, we will create again, our creations will destroy us, but that in the mix of that there is some entity, some being who is, pulling the strings and pointing characters in certain directions, maybe to ensure that this happens again, or maybe to ensure that there is just some level of survival, that if there weren't strings being pulled, maybe there are no Cylons and no humans, and then there's nothing, and that's worse than this loop continuing. It's kind of left up to the viewer to decide.
Yeah, well, I want to get into some of these big theological, philosophical ideas that the story delves into. But first of all, there's one more character we should mention that we're introduced to at the beginning, a really important character, and that's Laura Roslin, right? Who is, when we first meet her, the very first scene, she is being diagnosed with cancer, right? Terminal breast cancer. Then she ends up, when the nuclear holocaust happens, she happens to be up in space on the Battlestar, right? Why is that again? She's doing it for some sort of political job.
Yeah, so they're turning the Galactica into the museum, and she is like one of the lower ministers, and the government just needs to have someone there.
A representative, exactly, because she is, I think, Minister of Education, right? Essentially, she was a teacher, and then she went into politics, and then when the genocide happens and humanity is wiped out, the line from the president downwards is wiped out, essentially. And I think because she was up in space and while the planets were being nuked, and she's something like 35th in line or something to power, she automatically becomes president of the colonies and basically becomes the sort of civilian equivalent to Commander Adama, right? So you have Commander Adama in charge of the military, and then Laura Roslin, this kind of like ex-school teacher with a terminal illness, becomes the leader of the civilian human race, essentially. Played by Mary McDonnell. Alex, we've talked about Mary McDonnell already in Donnie Darko, funnily enough. But what do you think of Laura Roslin
and Scream 4?
And Scream 4, about her crucially, exactly.
There's a lot. She keeps coming up. Oh God, I love her so much. because again, she presents as this kind of, depending on your politics, she presents as this kind of bastion of democracy and standing for the right thing and doing the right thing. And she's, there's a bit of a tension between the military and then whatever else. And she's going to do the right thing, whatever it takes, until she's about to lose power, in which case she's very happy to throw an election. She's very happy to just,
she does
keep
some
that power
pretty fucking questionable things throughout this show.
She thinks she can do it better than the person who might replace her, and so she'll do whatever she can to hold on to that power because, the greater good. And she, I just love that, we haven't really talked about the politics of the show. But I love that the show makes space for everybody, makes space for every point of view. Like, it doesn't feel, I'd be really interested to know, like, the makeup of the writer's room and what kind of people they had in there, because they've got it's got a real kind of well, no, like one of the things you said, like, is the show pro-military? And I was like, I don't know if it's pro-anything. Like, it's sort of, it takes every subject and blows it apart and looks at it from every angle and shows you how everybody is potentially a failure. And that includes Laura Roslin, who, like you say, she's like this, I think she's like, this left wing, like whatever, idealistic, let's have elections, whatever
humanist
else.
and everything.
Humanist. But then also, like, one of the first things that she has to decide is whether to ban abortion.
Oh my God.
And she's like, I think we do have to ban abortion because we need people to start having babies. And, like, if we want that number to go up, we can do it. And so, like, immediately the show just goes to places that I think is really brave, actually.
The politics is some of the most interesting stuff for me, especially on this rewatch. I really loved it. Ben, how do you find Laura Roslin and that kind of political side to the show?
Oh, it's fascinating because you love that character. I think even when she is not really making great choices, again, there is a warmth to that character. You understand that there is a core of goodness to that character. I think if the show is pro anything, it is largely pro democracy, because the times we can feel conflicted about Laura Roslin is when she is going to subvert democracy for her own ends. But even then, as a viewer, you understand that she's trying to subvert democracy because the person who might be elected by a democratic vote is somebody who is going to, like, fundamentally be a danger to the entirety of humanity. And when power is taken away from that character, when that character does not have power, some pretty heinous things happen. And so, it's great because it questions all of those things. But that is maybe why the show sort of still feels like an early to mid 2000s show, is because it has a really strong core value of democracy matters, and that whatever is happening on Galactica, especially as the show goes on, it can't all be Cylon firefights every week. So a lot of episodes, especially as you head like into season 2 and 3, is like, oh no, this situation is happening on the Galactica and these people don't have food. So what's the government going to do to sort it out? And so a lot of the show becomes about, like, how are the political structures of Galactica either serving people or not serving people? What are the failings? How can that be rectified? And how do these individual characters who you wholeheartedly root for, how are they caught in the machinations of that system and forced to either make really hard decisions or hold the line against a potentially understandable but non-democratic decision being made? So really, really gets into the nitty-gritty of it. And it is uncomfortable because you love Laura Roslin. I love Laura Roslin. And again, as the show goes on, there is a sort of long, slow romance between Laura Roslin and Commander Adama. And my God, especially on this rewatch, I was rooting for those crazy kids to make it.
Me too.
It's so cute, though, isn't it? But And they have such a brilliant evolution of their relationship too, because initially they clash, right? You know, when shit goes down, when humanity is wiped out, when they're under attack by Cylons, you've got Commander Adama that is like, let's fight, this is war. And she pulls rank and she's like, I'm the president of the colonies. We're going to run. We have to run. We have to survive. And he's like, how dare you? I'm not taking orders from a school teacher. We're not running. We're fighting. And, you know, so there is this constant kind of back and forth between the two of them as who's in charge. Should this be like a military, like a martial law type thing? Or should this be a democracy? What's our best chance at surviving? And then they just become the most adorable little team, don't they, as it goes on. And I was crying by the end of season 4 with these two.
Mate,
incredible.
I tell you that I watched the last episode, and at the very end of the last time we see those two characters, I had big fat tears just rolling down my cheeks because I was like, they're so. I just was, like Ben was saying, I was rooting for them so hard.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh my God.
Just beautiful.
This rewatch especially.
Completely. So we've gone through all of those incredible characters. We don't have time to get through all of the story beats, but I want to go through the way that this show kind of evolves and some of the major story beats, particularly in relation to the Cylon lore and I guess how the sci-fi man-made monster stuff kind of evolves as the show goes on. So in this initial miniseries, when the humanity is under attack and we learn that there are 12 Cylon models, we meet number 6, Trisha Helfer. We don't know who else is going to be a Cylon at this point. And then we meet a couple more. I think we meet a number 4 or something? He's like
I can never remember the numbers.
I can't remember the numbers either, but there are a couple of kind of slightly B or C tier characters that we meet in the miniseries. One becomes known as Leobin, right? And you know, we kind of introduced this idea that, okay, there might be a couple of other random baddies. But the big reveal, the big cliffhanger at the end of the miniseries before we hurtle into series 1 is that there is a character called Sharon Valeri, right, who is a pilot. She's part of the Battlestar. We've already got to know her across the miniseries. She's great. She seems very kind of like heroic and morally good. She is a Cylon, right? And there are multiple versions of her out there as well. That's the other thing about the Cylons, is that there are multiple versions of the same model. And then throughout season 1, and Alex, you mentioned this because you missed the miniseries, so you dove straight into series 1. And we have to deal with the fact that there are 2 Sharons, right? One that is known as Boomer on the Battlestar, who is kind of grappling with the idea that maybe she doesn't know she's a Cylon, but there is something about her that is maybe waking up or activating throughout season 1.
She's effectively a sleeper agent that's about to get triggered.
Exactly.
She's sort of like a lot of shady stuff is happening. Like she's waking up completely drenched in water.
Oh, God. And then somebody sabotaged the water on the ship.
Somebody sabotaged the water tank. So she's like, oh.
It's incredible. So we know she's a Cylon. She doesn't know, and no one else on the ship knows she's a Cylon. Then meanwhile, confusingly down on Caprica, on the planet that has been nuked, we meet another Sharon who very much knows she's a Cylon, but she goes through a bit of a journey where she starts to turn sort of good and joins humanity's side because she falls in love with a guy called Agathon, right, as well. So how do you find that kind of tension, Ben, of the Cylon models, particularly in the first season, and what they do with Sharon?
Oh, it is one of the best elements of the show, and one of the key narrative drivers to this, of like the overarching mystery of who are the 12 Cylon models, who else is going to be revealed as a Cylon, and then it's not just about knowing who they are, it's then like experiencing through these characters what it means when they realize that they are Cylons, that they are traitors to the human race, that they are not human, that at their very core they are not what they thought they were, that they don't know how much of what they remember is real. What is an implanted memory? What is not? When did they become integrated with the rest of the human race? It throws up all of these questions that are existentially quite terrifying.
This goes back to Blade Runner, right, and Deckard. This is do androids dream of electric sheep? This is, in my opinion, I think this show does it better than almost anything else I've covered this series about like what it means to be human, what it means to be programmed as a machine, have your memories programmed. Does that still make you human ultimately, even if you're programmed? It's genius the way it's dealt with here, I think.
And what I think is so key to this, and I was really watching out on a rewatch, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the show never really gives you a fundamental sort of distinction between what makes a human and what makes a Cylon.
No.
The key thing with the Cylons is that because they are cybernetic to whatever degree, when they die, their consciousnesses can be uploaded to like backup bodies, because there's a bunch, as you say, a bunch of these models. And so there is an immortality to the Cylons that the humans don't have. As a human, if you get killed, you're dead. If you're a Cylon and you get killed, you get beamed back to like a base ship somewhere. But there is, as far as I can recall, there is not like a Terminator moment where some like skin gets ripped off and underneath they're like a metal skeleton and full of wires. When the Cylons are injured or when they are undergoing very human experiences like getting pregnant and all of these things, the show never goes, oh, these characters are like a bunch of wires. We never actually understand what the Cylons are. And so it is a constant question through the show of like, so what are the Cylons?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Is there a difference between Cylons and humans?
Yeah.
Yes, we created them, but also we created the toaster versions, and then there is a question again of like who then created the sort of human style Cylon models, but we never fundamentally understand what they are. And rather than being wishy-washy bullshit, that is like the total key to the show for me, because you have these characters wrestling with what they are, but also we don't know what they are and they don't know what they are, and everybody gets to question like, why does that matter? What does that mean?
Yeah, completely. I mean, Alex, they are, in terms of the design of these robots, these Cylons, they're organic, right? They're flesh and bones and organs and everything. So yeah, like ultimately, is there a difference between a Cylon and a human in this show?
No, and again, this is one of those elements that I think is really brilliant, that is a constraint. Like, if you'd had more of a budget, maybe you would have done something. Maybe you would have made it so like...
Well, they had glowing spines when they have sex, when they have orgasms. Essentially,
but that's
what we
quite
get.
expensive, right? Maybe to have in every episode, so maybe we won't do that. But like, what that means is then you've got to be really clever about the kind of technology. And I love that, because you do sort of see the evolution, because you've got the old Centurions, which were basically the ones from the 70s show. Then you've got the upgraded Centurions. Then you've got like the hybrid, which is the thing that flies the base ship, which is kind of like what you would expect the cybernetic, like half human, there's wires, like Matrix wires plugged into the back of the head kind of vibes.
Yeah.
But then the way that the Cylons are controlling the ship is like they put their hands into this water, into this fluid. And it's such an organic... it's such an organic way of connecting.
Yes,
that you can imagine, you know. And the thing that I wrote down in my notes here was like, I've always felt like this show was more interested in a kind of emotional truth than it was in a scientific truth. Like, it's not interested in explaining away, is it, you know, midichlorians, like what is it, like it's not like nanites, exactly. It's not little things coming in, like it's not doing that. It's just like, just take it for what it is. They're completely indistinguishable, except there is a test. If we want to, we can find out how to determine them. And
even that test is so sort of ambiguous and vague, right? Gaius Baltar,
only because
again,
there's the only one person who gets to do it is the guy who you can never trust anyway.
Gaius Baltar, the least trustworthy character, is the one who designs this like Cylon test, and he says, I can distinguish between Cylons and humans. And there are multiple occasions through the first season when he will test people, and he won't tell anyone the results anyway, right? So he knows
the Boomer's a Cylon.
So he finds out Sharon is a Cylon even before Sharon knows, right? And do we think there's a moment, and we haven't even spoken about Ellen, we will, but there's a moment when Ellen arrives in season 1, who turns out to be one of the Cylons. He tests her, and we never find out what he sees, and he says, I'll never tell, or something at the end of the episode. But it's like, did Gaius always know?
I'll never tell, because the writers have not yet figured out who all the Cylons.
But the final 5 is different, guys. The final 5 is different.
We're going to get to that. But there are a few kind of like pseudo-science-y differences, aren't there? Like, I think Doc Coddle mentions that there is a cellular kind of makeup to them that he notices that is different between Cylon and human.
They don't have any antibodies in the blood or something.
Yeah. But essentially, one of the I guess two of the major things actually that make them different is that at least initially Cylons don't think they can reproduce, right? That's a major thing, and particularly number 6 wants to find the secret to how they reproduce, and she thinks it might be to do with love, that you need to love in order to create life, right? So they can't reproduce, but they can resurrect, right? And I suppose that's the main thing, is that you can't fucking kill them. As soon as you kill them, they download and resurrect again. Do you think they have like slightly increased strength? I feel like at least in season 1, number 6 seems to have slightly
they all do
super strength, doesn't she?
Later on, one of the final 5 chucks someone across an airlock.
Right, okay, yeah. But it's interesting, again, I know the writers probably didn't know, but some of the final 5 in season 1 don't necessarily have super strength in season 1.
So. They haven't been activated. They haven't heard the tune yet.
We haven't even got to All Along the Watchtower yet.
Oh no, that's exciting. Good. I can't wait.
But what a brilliant mystery at the heart of this show. So we know roughly 4 or 5 Cylon models when season 1 kicks off. We know that there are at least 7 more that could be hiding in amongst our main characters on the ship. Season 1, Ben, I think is like one of the most perfect seasons of television there is, basically. You've got this mystery, this kind of almost whodunit. You've got this action-packed, fleeing from the Cylons and the space battles and all of that. You've got all of this politics and religion and character dynamics. Like, it's pretty incredible stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it sounds damning to say this, and I don't mean it in this way, but it is the best season of the show, I think. There are so many fascinating things about seasons 2, 3, and 4, but season 1, there is such a purity to it. As you say, it has such a narrative drive to it of just like, we just have to escape the Cylons. And there's so much potential in all of these storylines that it's setting up. The characters are so strong. It's very tight. It's a shorter season than the rest of them. I mean, we are in the blissful era, as you say, of like network TV. And so it's like 20 episode seasons, and they were just cranking it out, and you spend loads of time with these characters. But season 1 is a bit shorter, and it's more like a military show than anything else. So much of it is about the military command and about how Adama is running the ship in order to just evade the Cylons who are hot on humanity's tail from the off. And but as you say, you also have a couple of other storylines that are really interesting of Boomer Sharon on the Galactica starting to realize that she might be a Cylon, and then following some characters on the nuked out Earth, including another Sharon and Agathon, who are trying to escape Cylon-occupied Caprica and make their way off planet. And so it feels huge, the show. It feels massive, even though they're doing some very obvious filmmaking tricks.
I love that there's an orange filter basically over nuked Caprica,
Yeah.
So funny.
They just put a colour on the screen and they're like, that'll do. That's radiation, right, guys?
That's radiation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're basically living in threads down on Caprica.
Oh, God.
But it has such momentum. But what I also love, Alex, about season 1, and I lament this all the time, but it also, as well as having this driving narrative, it also had a little story of the week too, didn't it? It was like, this week we've run out of water. This week it's about the politics, and and it has its little like weekly challenges that humanity has to face as well.
It's that perfect encapsulation of like the there is an ongoing thread, but also, as you say, you've got it strikes that balance so well. And I think the other, like every other show, when it spreads out, like you end up with mythology episodes, and you end up with
Monster of the Week,
Story of the Week episodes, Monster of the Week episodes, exactly. Like ever since X-Files, this has always been an issue. But like, what a perfectly contained thing. And the thing that I will say about this show as well is, like, by God, does it know how to do a season finale? Oh, what cliffhangers from this show! Unbelievable. I love that. There's some of my favourite moments. I can still picture like Astons that come out like on screens when it says like 3 words that come on screen, and I'm like, my jaw is on the floor during a season finale.
Because that first season finale, we haven't also mentioned one of the biggest things of the show, which is that humanity in escaping the Cylons needs a new home, and the home that they are seeking is the mythical Earth that humanity came from. So humans have come from Earth, colonized the galaxy, the universe, and we've lost basically where Earth was. It's been so long ago. There are the 12 colonies in relation to the Lords of Kobol, the sort of gods that humanity is serving.
So Earth, they came from Earth and went to Kobol, and then from Kobol they went to 12 different colonies, I think. So we're backtracking through time, so they've got to get to Kobol first. Is that right, Mike? No,
I'm gonna do. We're gonna get into this as we go. I have actually written out what I think is a timeline of Battlestar Galactica, but I think Kobol is the very, very first place. I mean, who knows? Because I suppose also the point of this show is
looping.
As we discover, everything is looping, and actually there could be an Earth for every cycle, right?
Yeah.
There is an Earth that is the planet where humanity are based, and then it gets fucked and nuked, and then they go find somewhere else, and then eventually they will go and find a new Earth, right? But yes, exactly, that brilliant conceit, and again a really bleak one in a way, because the miniseries ends with Commander Adama sort of giving humanity that hope, saying we're going to find a new home, we're going to find Earth. There are these ancient scrolls that tell us where Earth is, and so everyone is like, "Way, we're going to find a new home. We're going to be okay." And then Adama is like, "That was a lie. I don't think there is an Earth. I just need to give humanity something to believe in." Right. So the whole driving force of this show is they're on their way to a planet called Earth, which may not actually even exist, and our main hero doesn't believe actually exists.
But then you get to see it slowly falling apart. Like, they all believe it. And you can see on the inside, like, it's only him and Rosalind, I think, and maybe there's a couple other people they let on the secret, but it's like everybody else believes that he's got the secret knowledge and they need to do this thing. And then he said it, and then he's got no leads.
Yes.
So then he has to then latch onto this crazy shit from Rosalind, who starts like getting visions off her cancer medication of like doing religious stuff, and he's like, well,
yes.
I guess because I've got nothing else.
Exactly.
And it gradually unravels over all of the time until they eventually, do find Earth.
Exactly. So this is another interesting, the lore, the mythology that starts to creep in through season 1, right, is that Laura Roslin, as you said, Alex, she's taking this quite strong medication for her cancer, and as such is having hallucinations and visions, which she believes are genuine, like visions from God, potentially, right? And that is where we end up at the end of season 1, landing on this planet, Kobol, which is where humanity once lived thousands of years ago, and she's got to find this like mystical arrow that's going to point them in the direction of Earth through kind of stars and everything. So, Ben, at this point, like, the show starts dealing with, I don't know if we want to call it like magic rather than sci-fi, but the almost a kind of spiritual or supernatural element, right? Which, again, I know for a lot of people, the show ends up leaning too hard on. How do you find that, Ben? That kind of introduction of the visions and the religion and all of that?
I love it. I think it's incredible, and I think it's as I said before, so tied into what the show is, because the stakes are so high. The stakes from the very beginning are the literal survival of the human race, which is rapidly dwindling in numbers with an enemy closing in. And so every decision, whether that's a scientific decision, whether that is a logical decision, or whether that is a decision based on the president having cancer visions that seem to correspond with ancient scrolls, I guess. Every single decision is like humanity, literal humanity hangs in the balance. And so, again, the show is questioning, like, can we believe this? Is it worth believing in this stuff? But how terrible would it be not to take the chance on the thing that you believe in? Because actually, that might be right. Even if it's not logical, it might be right. And if we don't follow that, then we're also fracked.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant question. I think for me, there is an element of, as the show goes on, what I love about it, for the most part, is that it holds the scientific and the religious in ways that feel a bit more ambiguous, and they're kind of going hand in hand, and it really is up to viewer interpretation of like quite what is happening. Whereas as it goes on, there are things that feel more explicitly it can only be the religious supernatural angle, which I don't mind. Lost also does the same thing, and I kind of go with it there. But in Battlestar Galactica, again, it's part of why it's so fascinating, because on the one hand, it is a nuts and bolts military and space show, but that is also dealing with these big sort of religious ideas. And towards the end of the show, it really like makes the religious stuff more explicit in a way that is then like less ambiguous and down to viewer interpretation.
But then it just always reminds me of the Arthur C. Clarke quote of, any technology, any civilization that's sufficiently advanced will just seem like magic. So
exactly,
there's a point at which like maybe it's magic anyway, actually, and like you've already suspended your disbelief this much. Like, what is magic?
Well, absolutely.
And I never rubbed up against it, and I like all the people on the internet, because this was the days of forums. There wasn't like Twitter or whatever else. It was like everyone was on digital spy forums, like blah, 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 blah. And I just never got on board with the hate for all of the religious stuff. I'm like, it's just a story, guys. Like, also robots are not real. Just so you know,
it's so true. It's so true. I do think that it does slightly lean into it in a way that maybe just feels a little bit like it's quick storytelling fix towards the end at times. So it's more as a kind of storytelling device. I start to lose it a bit with the religious stuff towards the end. But I think in the early days, it's perfect. And I think you're absolutely right, Ben, that tension between like the scientific and the religious, and it's so open to interpretation. The fact that Laura Roslin is having these like visions, but because she's actually hallucinating because she's taking really strong meds, right? And so how much of it is coincidence? How much of it is people interpreting scripture and religion in a certain way to fit what they want it to be? And that is, so I think all of that is, handled so well, especially in the early seasons.
I hear what you're saying about narrative shortcuts, and I don't disagree, but also like I would love to give it its props for actually having an ending. Yeah. Like choosing to end and being like, this is definitively like you couldn't do a requel of this. There's no way to, like, if you're going to do it again, you've got to restart the whole thing. The ending, I understand the problem people have with it, and that I think sometimes in my head I can see the flaws, but emotionally I love it as it's such an emotionally satisfying ending, isn't it? I much prefer that.
If we're talking about the time and place that this comes from as well, though, as you say, it's early internet, it's forum days, and it is a time where audiences demanded answers. And Lost was the same thing. I love Lost, and actually I love it more and more as time goes on for the things that it decided not to answer, because it's a show about a magic island, and we don't need answers to everything, in the same way that one of the reasons we love Twin Peaks is because half of it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
and it is a mystery.
Twin Peaks never gave answers. It's so interesting, yeah.
Whereas Battlestar Galactica, I feel like they, even though I didn't watch it as it went out, I imagine they were in a slightly tricky situation of like, we don't want to have to give rational answers to everything, but there are very noisy people on the internet who I think will be deeply pissed off with us if we don't explain some things in a way that almost becomes slightly detrimental to it as it goes on.
Well, and I think that's really interesting when it comes to, like, you talked about the kind of whodunit element and actually the who is it element of the revealing of the Cylons, because you guys will have experienced it as a box set. I experienced it over 6 years.
Yeah.
And so the Who Are the Final Five took on this like totemic kind of thing, and they built promo campaigns around it, and it's like, you're going to find out, and it was like, when are we going to find
Laura
out?
Palmer, right? It's like,
when are you going to tell us? When are you going to tell us? And I remember it was like saying some of the Final Five will be revealed, and then it was like, you're going to find out who it is, and it became the meta narrative, and it started to distract from what actually the point of the story was and what the story they were trying to tell was. And like on the rewatches, I'm seeing it a lot more through that sense of the overarching story that they're trying to tell. And I think the first time through, I got caught up in the marketing.
Totally.
Which was very much like the hook, which is who are the Final Five and all of that.
Oh my God. I mean, the first time I watched it, even on the box set, that was the thing I was obsessed with. That was the thing I wanted to know. I loved it whenever we got a Cylon-centric episode and we were going to maybe meet a new Cylon or would be revealed a new Cylon. That was the stuff that really hooked me. And actually, less and less on rewatches, I now love all of the other stuff. I love the politics, the military stuff, the relationships.
Some of the people they bring in to be Cylons as well. Like, you get Lucy Lawless and Dean Stockwell. Like, oh my God, if you're going to pick anybody, icons.
So interesting, isn't it? And I think there's this other thing about the television of this era, speaking of Lost. Network television, and I'm guessing probably cable television is the same, where they don't necessarily know at the beginning how long this is going to go on for, how many seasons it's going to be, whether it will even end before being cancelled, right? And so unlike a lot of shows now where it's like Netflix are going to give you, 10 episodes to tell your complete story or whatever, this was much more on a kind of season to season, year to year basis, right? And so the opening captions that we get at the beginning of every episode, Ben, that says the Cylons have a plan. Was there a plan? Did the writers have a plan for who was a Cylon, who wasn't, where this was going?
The Cylons had part of a plan. The plan is we're winging it.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, it is. You can debate whether it's a good thing or a bad thing until the cows come home, but it is just a fundamental fact of what TV was in those days, and I like that, to be honest. Like, again, sorry, I keep bringing up Lost, but it's such a key, it's a core.
It's an easy parallel,
and it is an easy parallel. But to me, there is an energy sometimes that you get from these shows of the fact that they are doing the Wallace and Gromit laying down the track in front of the train, the runaway train as it goes. That. Yeah, it's not going to marry everything up perfectly. They might take some weird detours, but the pace and the energy and the excitement of just like, we kind of don't know where we're going, but fuck, what's the next crazy thing that could happen and where's that going to lead us, is partly why these shows are so great and so addictive, and that, as Alex said, gives you incredible finales. The first season when they get to Kobol, season 2, the end of season 2 when they find a habitable planet. It's a horrible planet, but it's habitable. And so they're like, I guess we should leave the Battlestar and settle down here for a while, and totally shifts the what the show is for a while. Those are huge, exciting moves, and they can kind of just follow their nose of what they think is exciting and where it's going to lead, even if it doesn't mean that on a rewatch that you go, oh, they clearly knew exactly where they were going all along. They didn't. But that's okay.
Absolutely it is.
They had a pretty good go at explaining it. Have you seen the plan?
Only first time round, so I haven't watched that in 20 years.
Like, it's not it's like retcon the movie. It's basically like, how are we gonna retroactively make it seem like all of the choices that we made along the way actually were intentional?
But like Ben said, I don't need that. I actually don't mind a few storytelling holes. I think the older I've got, the more I love these shows from this era, whether it's Buffy, Twin Peaks, X-Files, Lost, shows that maybe are a little bit janky and slightly kind of go back on what they are. I think those are the ones that somehow are more interesting, and they're the ones that are more rewatchable than these kind of perfectly crafted little 10-hour film TV shows that we get these days, and you can dive into certain episodes and everything as well. So season 1 ends on a banger of as you mentioned, Ben,
literally
a banger of a finale. Yeah, and after this kind of adventure on this planet Kobol, and everything seems great, and they get back to Battlestar, Sharon Valeri, the secret sleeper agent, wakes up, right, and she shoots Adama. That's it. It's like this almighty panic. Adama is bleeding out. Sharon is a Cylon, everyone knows. End of season 1, right? Unbelievable. Season 2 gets bigger. It's twice the length of season 1. We meet new Cylons, new characters. We are introduced to characters like Sam Anders, who becomes a new kind of love interest for Starbuck. We meet new Cylon models played by, as you said, Alex, Lucy Lawless plays number 3. We've got Dean Stockwell playing number 1, who we meet towards the end of the season. We've got another Battlestar that comes into it as well, right? Ben, how did you find season 2 and some of those kind of new directions that the story goes in?
Both, in some ways, is better and bigger. The Pegasus arc, where they find another Battlestar that it was already in space when all the Caprica shit went down. And so they are also on the run and have been through terrible, terrible things themselves. And you're like, great, we have another Battlestar now, but also we've met this other faction of humanity that maybe doesn't align with Galactica and the other surviving ships, and it creates this huge, like, human civil war.
Adama's now outranked.
Yes, Adama is outranked by the leader of the Pegasus. So you have incredible storylines like that I had totally forgotten about from my first watch through. And on a rewatch, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
That's one of the best little mini arcs across the whole show. I think,
agree.
Totally. It's like the core of season 2, isn't it? It's right in the middle of the season, and it's so exciting.
That commander of the Pegasus she's a brilliant character as well. Like, terrifying, but also human too, and has been through so much, and it's so layered and so interesting, you know?
So that stuff is great, but then some of the episode of the week, this person, these people don't have enough shoes. What do we do? No, I can't remember what the ins and outs of them. There were a couple of episodes, like 2/3 of the way through the season, where I was like, I want to press fast forward on this.
There are a couple of dodgy ones, yeah. And actually, one of the elements we haven't really talked about in this show, which in a way it was kind of famous for even initially in the 70s, was its kind of pew 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 space fights against raiders and stuff, right? And there are a couple of episodes in season 2 where it's like there's one particular like raider called Scar that becomes like the focal point of an episode and stuff as well. Yeah, there's definitely a bit of filler going on right throughout season 2, but I don't know, Alex, high highs though as well as low lows, right?
I agree. It's that typical thing of when you get bigger, it just gets a bit flabby around the edges. But I agree. Like, there are some incredible moments, like the Pegasus again. I think season 2 might be my favorite, just because it's got Pegasus and it's got New Caprica at the end, like those, and that final episode. Like, the highs are so high, and it's still on the up. Yeah. Everything is still kind of, and you get like you say, new reveals of new Cylons, and it all feels like it's still, the world is still being built out, and I really. It doesn't. It's bleak, but it's not like full nihilism that you get in season 3, and especially the second half of season 4, which gets really sad, just depressing.
Saying that though, some of the fallout of the Pegasus stuff, when then like some of the guys from the Pegasus come across to Galactica and they're gonna like rape Sharon or something. There's a few moments where it's like, oh, this is really gnarly and upsetting.
It's in that torture porn era. It's like verging into that sort of territory, isn't it?
But as we said as well, like dealing with the politics at the time, it's like, okay, dealing with these militaristic characters who are exuding power and exuding force to do actually really reprehensible things in the context of this conflict where they feel justified in doing it and there is a clear enemy. So why shouldn't they be sort of inflicting terror upon people? And so it's really getting into stuff. It's not shying away from things, but I think it also...
And on the front page of the newspaper was Guantanamo Bay. This is what was... It was all parallel. It was all happening at the same time.
It's all parallel. I kind of applaud it for not pulling its punches, but there are elements of it that are like hard to watch these days. I was shocked by some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think, again, the character of Sharon Valeris is so interesting, right? Because she, even after she is, shoots Adama and turns out to be a Cylon agent, she's kept in a cell throughout most of season 2. But I think season 2 is where the kind of moral ambiguity starts to come in, where actually some Cylons actually genuinely might be good, some might be bad. And actually you find during that Pegasus arc that a lot of the humans are going to stick up for the Cylons over some of their own fellow humans, right? For example, that scene when the two men attack Sharon, and it's like, no, that's not, none of our main characters, no matter how much they want to fight or kill the Cylons, think that that's a cool thing to do, and I love that kind of, this is where the kind of Cylon versus human binary, Alex, starts to kind of bleed in season 2, doesn't it, as well? There are going to be good humans and bad humans, good Cylons and bad Cylons, I guess.
And then it becomes a story about people. I'm trying to think of the right word. Like, it's about humanity and people, like what counts as people. And you're more, I guess the central kind of thesis is you're defined by your actions and your decisions more than you are like where you've come from and whether you were made or born or whatever else.
And I think Sharon Valerii is the kind of crux of this, right? Her Cylon model is, I don't know, slightly more inconsistent, slightly more changeable. She's led by her heart, right? You've got the sleeper agent Boomer who does some terrible things, but then, you know, does she actually have all of this guilt? You have the other Sharon down on Caprica who starts off as a Cylon working for the Cylons, but then she falls in love and switches sides. The other Cylon models kind of talk about her model as being weak, as being flawed, right? Because she constantly is switching sides, switching allegiances. She is led by her heart, by love. She's the one that gives birth to a human baby, or a Cylon-human hybrid baby, right? So in a way, Ben, Sharon as a Cylon character is the kind of heart of this show, isn't she? And she's emblematic of the idea that are Cylons any different to humans, right?
Yeah, and you've got Sharon, who was on Caprica with Agathon, who is pregnant. And so over the course of this season in particular, but as the show goes on, she aligns more and more with the humans and becomes accepted by the humans. But Boomer Sharon, once she's activated and once she shoots Adama, obviously there is a lot of upsets on the human side from that. And so there's a lot of retaliation against her. And over the course of the show, she becomes more and more radicalized and leans further into her Cylonity, if we're going to coin a terrible word. So she's an interesting character because certain models, you get the sense they are who they are. And they're always going to have a predisposition to be a certain way. Sharon, as you say, is fluid, and we see different Sharons react in different ways and go on different trajectories over the course of the whole show.
Alex, there's a real kind of nuance, isn't there? Because in some ways, all of the various versions of the same model are the same. They look the same. They have the same personality traits. But like you said, when you were talking about the various sixes, there are also differences too, right, that come in. And it's really kind of nuanced and interesting.
It's nature versus nurture. And I think that's the thing that's really interesting to me. So like before I had kids, I was like, it's all about nurture. You know, it's about the environment that you're in, blah, blah, blah. And then when they turned up, they were born with a personality and a completely specific thing. And they do certain things or whatever else. And that they were always going to do those things. But so it is more of a mix. And I think that's what's interesting is like there's the nature of each of the Cylons. And then depending on their situation, they are more affected by the nurture and their environment. And you're dead right with the number fours, like the Sharons. They're the ones that are the most susceptible, I guess. And then you've got the number ones, you know. And eventually, when we get to the end when you get to season 4, and there's a Cylon civil war, you see this kind of split where certain models go on one side and they're very fixed in their ways, and certain models are more amenable to thinking differently and being influenced.
Exactly. Showing that they're basically exactly the same as humans, right?
100%.
So there is a big kind of moment that happens towards the end of season 2. Politically, it gets really interesting. Alex, you talked earlier about how this series almost kind of anticipated the rise in populism, right? And there is a moment in season 2 when we have a general election for a new president. And Laura Roslin is running to be president again, but she's up against toxic tech bro Gaius Baltar, right, who really does embody that kind of populist politics where he essentially tells the fleet whatever it is they want to hear, no matter how realistic it might be, in order to get votes and be loved and be popular. And this is around the time when they have discovered a new kind of wasteland planet, but it is inhabitable. There is a planet that they could technically go and live on. It has oxygen, it has, you know, whatever, but it is the temperature, the quality of the air, you know, there is no like vegetation. It's a wasteland. Laura Roslin is like, we cannot land on this planet. This is a bad idea. Follow me. I have visions. I'm going to take us to Earth. Gaius Baltar is like, don't you think we've been following visions from a mad, dying leader long enough? Let's land on this planet right here. We will call it New Caprica. We will make it our home. You can lay down your burdens. We can finally stop running from the Cylons and fleeing through space. Let's make this planet our new home. And of course, they go with him, right? Even though all of the experts are saying we should not land on this planet. And this is where the show slightly takes a turn, right? At the end of season 2, midway through the whole series, the humans land on New Caprica and create a home. And God, shit gets dark, Ben, right?
Yeah, and as Alex said, incredible finales in this because halfway through the final episode, it's like, boom, we're on New Caprica. We have a time jump. We catch up with all the characters like a year or so down the line, I believe.
1 year later.
And these are 3 words, Alex, you were talking about.
It's the 3 years. It zooms in on like an image inside Colonial 1 and then zooms back out again. And you're like, oh, things look a bit different 1 year later. I remember my jaw hitting the floor.
And then every character you've known comes back in a different wig. They've all got long hair. And
maybe an eye patch.
Yeah, or maybe like uncomfortably a bit of a fat suit.
Oh god, so funny. Fat Leodama is hilarious, and then he does a couple of press ups and he goes back to normal the following week.
All gone.
Incredible.
Oh my god, network TV guys. And yeah, so they land on Caprica. They're like, ooh, it's nice to be off that Battlestar. Then suddenly the fracking Cylons come in, occupy humanity on New Caprica.
Gaius surrenders. He gives
Gaius
a complete surrender.
Immediately surrenders, which then
and the fleet fracks off.
And the fleet fracks off because they're like, we've got to skedaddle. So there's barely anybody on the Battlestar, but they've managed to escape. Most of humanity is on New Caprica under Cylon occupation. Gaius Baltar has surrendered to the Cylons, and it becomes a big thing across season 3 of like, that was a terrible decision, but also what choice did I have? They would literally have just murdered us all. And it starts this like really dark storyline of humanity living under Cylon rule in this dictatorship.
But they go for it. They really go for it, and they go into like collaboration. They go, and then it becomes like a Second World War.
It becomes it becomes a Nazi Germany allegory, doesn't it? So the first like 4 or 5 episodes of season 3 are. Yeah, we're living in a kind of this kind of sci-fi version of Nazi Germany where like the Cylons are rounding up people to take them away and execute them. You've got like rebels, you've got collaborators, you've got, enemies of the state and all of this. Poor Sultai gets his eye poked out because he's in the rebellion, right? This stuff is actually on this watch. I loved all of this stuff. Alex, how did you find the New Caprica arc?
I think it's one of my favorites just because of the way that they take a subject and then tease it out. They could have just like retconned it in the first episode and gone like, now we're done. But they'd spend, like you say, 4 or 5 episodes going through it, and then the ramifications of it carry the whole way through. And then there's the council of people who are hunting down collaborators and then shooting them, like giving them a kind of kangaroo court and shooting them out of airlocks if they were working with the Cylons. Like there's it's like taking these kind of story beats and then really, really interrogating them and like milking them and getting all the juice and up from every angle. Nobody comes out of these looking good. Everybody is flawed. And you're sort of there and you're thinking like one thing about one person and then they're actually secretly helping. And you say like, what would I have done in that situation? Like that's the greatest compliment you can pay.
I think there's one of the key examples is Ellen Ty, right? Sultai, and what she does. And she is secretly sleeping with one of the Cylons, but she's doing it because she wants him to free her husband and save her husband, but she's also giving them information in order to try and save her husband, and so then Saul has to kill her for being a collaborator. Like, it is bleak, isn't it?
Really
so
bleak.
Fucking bleak. It's really, really good stuff.
It's bleak. It's good stuff.
It's good stuff. We're in a horror podcast. Let's embrace the bleak. I don't like what they do to Starbuck though, as well. Like, Ben, how did you find this kind of weird little mini arc where she ends up in this kind of like domestic prison with this Cylon Leoben? Yeah,
it's a weird turn for that character because they've already somewhat like domesticated Starbuck a bit. Part of the weirdness of the time jump is she has like a snap marriage to Sam Anders, who, she was in love with, but also has not spent loads of time with that character. And then they're sort of in a semi-happy marriage, but you know that there is like nothing really underpinning it all. And then on top of that, as you say, she's like held captive by the Leoban Cylon, where she's sort of forced to live out these sort of domestic fantasies that he has of living with her. And it's hard to know whether the Cylons are torturing Starbuck or whether the writers are torturing Starbuck for sort of no reason.
Well, there was that episode in season 2 with the farm as well. Like, Starbuck gets put through a lot of really horrible stuff, and I kind of miss the cigar-smoking pilot Starbuck, you know, by this point. Yeah.
You know, they are giving Starbuck a lot of big things to play, but at the same time you do look at it now and a lot of her storylines are very gendered, and maybe some people like that and they say, look, they gender switch that character, and let's really interrogate what it would mean to be a woman in this situation. But there's also an element to which her stories often then correlate with the fact that she's a woman, and maybe unnecessarily so.
Yeah, completely. It's the beginning of a change for Starbuck, I think, Alex, that for me I don't love, and that's partly, even superficially, she becomes a little bit less fun as well, like as this kind of like rogue hero that she was in the first half of the show. This is where she starts leaning into the, am I special? Am I an angel? Am I, you know, blah, 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 and all of this other stuff that is, for me, less interesting than what Starbuck was initially.
Yeah, but I guess what she was initially was more of a replica of the original Starbuck in the show before. And actually, like, what is the place for that in this kind of rich narrative tapestry that you're pulling out? Like, if you look at other characters that are a bit more one note, like D, someone we haven't really talked about, because they sort of do one thing and they carry on doing that one thing, but there's not really a lot you can say with that one thing. That, like, they try and write a little bit here and there, and you know, I just wonder if they'd kept her as this kind of rogue quipping hero. Like, how does that work? What do you get? You can't, like, what does she do every week?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And again, one of the strengths of the show really is the way in which these characters change and evolve as the show goes on. And actually, D, maybe not so much, but there are certain characters that are like minor characters that then end up with really interesting arcs. I'm thinking of Felix Gator, for example, who, like, we haven't mentioned because he's a very minor character, but he has some amazing, really moving stuff in the final season as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, like, for me personally, it's less fun to watch Starbuck in some of the latter seasons, but I totally get it. You're right, and I admire the ambition in
and also
changing and evolving these characters.
When you've got an actor as good as that, you just want to give them great things to do, and you want to put them in situations where they can show their chops, and she is incredible.
Katie Sackhoff,
Katie Sackhoff's just an amazing job.
Yeah, absolutely. So season 3, very much dealing with the aftermath of New Caprica, right? And again, I think some of the darkest stuff when they're like, even when they're back on the ship, they're executing, they're giving people trials and executions for being collaborators and all of that kind of stuff. And also Gaius Baltar, his journey and his ultimate trial as to whether or not he should be executed for being a traitor as well, right?
Well, first of all, he goes off and lives with the Cylons for a bit.
He does, yeah. And I suppose that's the other thing, right, Ben? Season 3 really gives us a lot more intel into the Cylons, right? We spend time on the Cylon base ships and meet the hybrids and new models and all of that kind of stuff. How do you find the way the show depicts the Cylon kind of world?
I love it. It's cheap as chips. It is like,
and it's very like, woo,
it's
like very dreamy. They use cross dissolves and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
and they just rig up a couple of disco lights in a room that looks like it comes from like a 2000s music video, and they're like, that's a Cylon base ship. At the same time, I do like that because you feel the humanity and the lived-in-ness of the Galactica, and then you go to the Cylon base ship and it is like an Apple shop and it's empty and cavernous but also quite psychedelic. And so again, in that question of like, okay, fundamentally then what are the differences between humans and Cylons, that comes through in the base ship because you get a sense that like on a cognitive level they are distinct from humans, and that comes through not just in the fact that they don't really seem to have like culture or stuff, but they also are living in this like tripped out psychedelic like weird Twilight Zone. And so that maybe says something about what the experience of being a Cylon is.
I completely agree, and I think it comes from the fact that they can't die. That's why they're in stasis. It's like there's like how many, 6 of them, right? Just hanging out. It's like it's friends.
So,
6 of them in an apartment.
Much of our human culture and storytelling comes from the fact that we are all constantly processing the fact that one day we're going to die. And if that's not the case for you, maybe you don't create.
If that's not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that comes into it, right? I think it's season 3 or maybe it's early season 4, but there is this reveal that there is the resurrection hub, right? Which is essentially where all of the new Cylons are, re-downloaded and where the models are kept. And actually, our humans discover if they destroy that resurrection hub, they destroy the Cylons' ability to resurrect. Therefore, they're essentially no more powerful than humans, right? And there are some Cylon models, I believe number 6 and maybe number 8, who are like, maybe it's important that, like you said, like how it gives us something to live for if we know we can't resurrect. And then obviously certain other models are like, no fucking way, we can't have this. And yeah, so that actually comes into play, I believe, towards the end of season 3, right, where we're going to destroy the Cylons' ability to resurrect. Therefore,
I think that's in season 4. There's two things. So there's one bit where they destroy the resurrection ship, which means any of the local Cylons,
that's right,
if they die, they're going to be dead forever. So they sort of like do a little bit, but it doesn't. And then in season 4, it's like, no, this is it. This is the technology of resurrection, which we will now destroy.
It looks like a kind of beehive colony or something from a distance.
Organic.
Yeah, it's so organic.
That's what I like about it. Like compared to the utilitarian nature of all the human ships that have all got. They've got different shapes, but the shapes are all meant to do something. But the Cylons have all got like angles and pointy things. And
everything is very. It's like octagons, isn't it? On the Battlestar, have you noticed that? Even when they read pieces of paper, they've got the corners taken away. Everything is in that kind of octagon shape, isn't it? I love it. I want to get onto. We should wrap up on season 4 soon, but let's talk about the big reveal. At the end of season 3. So, Alex, you mentioned this. By about midway through season 3, 7 of the 12 Cylons we know about. And there was this...
6. Because Daniel...
No, but there are... there are still 7.
No, so there's 12.
There are still 7.
There are 12 models. Yeah, but the 7th model was the one that they created and then Cavill killed.
Yeah, I know,
he polluted the whole line.
Okay. So
or was that a separate one?
I think there were 13, including Daniel.
Oh,
we'll have to do a count. Either way, we know about all but 5 of the Cylon models, right? And so that was when the internet and fans lost their minds because there was this question, and they start talking about the final 5. Who are the final 5? Right?
And people have been having visions, and in the opera house, and there's 5 of them that are all lit up, and one of the Cylons has seen their faces, and so she knows who they are, but then they put her to sleep before she gets to tell anyone.
Yeah, exactly. So it became this big mythological point of the show, and at the end of season 3... What happens here, Ben? We start hearing some weird music.
Yeah, a bunch of characters across the ship start hearing, like, again, psychedelic, tripped-out music, like 60s
literally psychedelic,
yeah. It's in the fracking walls!
It's in the fracking walls! Oh, my God. Sultai is one of them. Tyrrell is one of them. And it becomes clear that these are, like, the 4 of the final 5... activating, and not just hearing music, but hearing all along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix.
It's the Jimi Hendrix version of the Bob Dylan song.
Yeah.
All along the Watchtower, which is the version that Dylan then preferred and played after he'd heard it. But I love this so much.
It
is so stupid. It's so...
When they're all creeping around the ship going, there must be some way out of here. Said the Joker
to the thief.
Be careful where you walk. There's lots of equipment around. It's all live.
Said the Joker to the thief. There's too much confusion here.
I can't get no relief.
Oh my god, it's so wild. What a wild swing. That's like, this show is full of wild swings, and this is the wildest, and I absolutely love it. Because then a whole load of people like were on the forums going, and the writers said, canonically, this is All Along the Watchtower. It is the same All Along the Watchtower that Bob Dylan writes. It is a mystical piece of music that echoes throughout all of time, and he is the person in our reality who tuned into it. That is the canonical answer.
Wait, so Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix Cylons? Confirmed?
I reckon. Yeah. Like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they say the answer to the universe is 42. Yeah. Here, the answer to the universe is All Along the Watchtower, right? It is the thing.
I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad. That's absolutely fine. So
put it in the same drawer as Josie turns into a doorknob.
Yes, exactly. So we've got, out of those the four of the five, we find out at the end, and Sultai, a character that's been in it from the very beginning, Admiral Adama's best friend. That's a big one, isn't it? Chief Tyrrell, again, a character who's very much been part of the core group from the very beginning. And then two characters we sort of care less about. There's Sam Anders.
They're kind of running out of people at this point because the show's been killing people off.
And then there's that woman Tori, who I think is sadly slightly underwritten as a character, really. Which
she gets a bit more to do once they realise that they've got no one else that can be a Cylon.
Yeah, exactly. And then season 4, and we then discover, I'll just say that we then discover Saul's wife, Ellen, who died, during the New Caprica. She was also one of the final 5, and she is resurrected. And but when she is resurrected, she has her memory of being 2,000-year-old Cylon, essentially. So she has a lot of the answers to the lore and the mythology, which we find out.
Not only that, she invented the Cylons.
Can we talk about the insane loredom? Because there is, in season 4, Sam Anders has been shot in the head.
Yeah.
And all of his Cylon memories are coming back to him. And this incredibly dense mythology of how many generations of Cylons were and who created who and who went to what Earth and where they came from is delivered in a 10-minute
honestly,
and then this happened and this happened. Even watching it now, I could not keep up with it. I was like, what the frack is happening? It's insane. They literally just go for 10 minutes of here's the answer to everything you ever wanted to know. And you're like, wait,
you wanted to know?
What
the series is ending. We've announced it's finished. Here you go.
Honestly, it's hilarious.
Careful what you wish for.
Do you want to know? I've got a really quick breakdown of it, right? This is what I understand. This is what I understand it to be. Humans lived on Kobol 2,000 years ago. This planet called Kobol. All of them lived together. They created Cylons. Humans split themselves into 12 tribes. There was a Cylon war. Humans had to find somewhere new to live. The humans went off, left Kobol, and settled on the 12 colonies. The Cylons, the humanoid Cylons, left for their own planet, and that's where they were the 13th tribe. They landed on Earth. Then they create a new race of humans based on them, their kind of humanoid Cylon models. They're able to reproduce. They fill the human race with these kind of humanoid Cylons that they were. And the final 5 are part of that race. And they lived on Earth as we know it, right?
Alex and I are dying inside. You are simultaneously breaking it down, and it is still coming across as.
I know.
I don't know if I agree.
No, this is what happened, Alex. I'm telling you. And then, Ellen, Sam, and that lot, the 5, they design resurrection while they're on Earth, because at this point they had destroyed the ability to resurrect, so they were just living as humans. They design resurrection, and then their Cylons, their Centurions, rise up, wipe that Earth out, but those 5 escape into space and resurrect. And
you are confirming this is too complex for its own good.
I agree with all of it, except I thought, and I could be wrong, right? But I thought they were human when they went to the 13th colony. So they were already humans, and then they turned themselves into Cylons.
Well, no, this is kind of the question: is what is human? I suppose because yes, you're right. Either they are human and they make a way to resurrect themselves thus turning them into
So
Cylons.
I think they do that. I think they did that on Earth.
On Earth, they did.
That then
yes.
becomes the
so they were born. So the final
wasteland.
5 were born on Earth, not on Kobol. So they were part of the Cylon race that left Kobol and settled on Earth. And then they designed a way to resurrect themselves. So when their Earth was nuked, that 5 get away, and they spend 2,000 years flying to find a new home. Because they hadn't invented light speed or something. There's like a throwaway comment about that. So they spent 2,000 years getting to the 12 colonies. And then they find themselves in the middle of the first Cylon War in the 12 colonies, where the Toasters are rising up and killing people. They stop that war by promising the Toasters, we will build you human Cylon models if you stop this war and go and live by yourself.
We'll give you resurrection.
And we'll give you resurrection, exactly. So they stop the war, they go off for like whatever it is, 30 or 40 years and disappear during the armistice, and then they create the human models. So it's the final 5 that create the 7, the 6, whatever it is, human models.
Because they create Cavill first.
Cavill first.
That's why he's number 1.
And then their creations basically destroy them. So Cavill, Dean Stockwell, decides he's going to kill his creators. He kills the final 5 or wipes their memories or something and then sends them to live on the 12 colonies as humans. And that's when they become Ellen and Sultai, and Sultai joins the Battlestar and everything. So the final 5 were sort of had their memories wiped by their own creation, Dean Stockwell, and were sent to live amongst the humans. And they had no idea they were Cylons, this ancient Cylon race, until all along the Watchtower woke them up.
Yeah. And there's an amazing line during that bit where the final 4 of the final 5 are revealed. Yeah. And Chief Tyrrell goes, we are Cylons, and we have been since the beginning. And he just says it because it's like, in case you all think we're going to get ourselves out of this, no, definitively, and we have been since the beginning.
So season 4, there's a lot of heavy stuff going on in the final season. It's very much split into 2 seasons. We have a writer's strike, there were problems, there were production issues. How do we find the final season of this show? Ben, what are your thoughts?
I like it, but it's really fucking bleak, because halfway through this season, they find Earth, the previous Earth, and it is an irradiated wasteland. And they thought they were going to find like a lush paradise, and they get to Earth and it's fucked. And all the characters go off the deep end.
The way they do that, where they're all having a party, they're high-fiving, everyone's celebrating, there's this triumphant music as all the ships are going down to the planet, and then it's just a hard cut to just a Geiger counter clicking, and everybody just staring, and it's just like, and then it was off air for a year.
Yes, and then it stopped for a whole year, and then the final half of the season, like you said, Ben, everyone loses their fucking minds in the second half of season 4, because that's it. This one glimmer of hope is gone. They have no home, they have no aim, and there's this almighty kind of mutiny that happens, isn't there? That's kind of like a major arc in the second half of season 4.
So good. Those 2 episodes are so good.
Really good, where these characters have just completely lost it. They turn on each other, they're destroying each other, people are getting executed. It's dark stuff, but I really like it.
And it reminds me of the final season of Lost as well, where it becomes part of the storytelling that a bunch of the characters that you love are technically still there, but they're not really themselves anymore. So it's a colder, like darker, meaner season overall. And Starbuck is not herself because she's dead and has somehow come back to life.
We didn't even mention that, but Starbuck died and came back to life, and so that's like what's going on with her. She's some sort of angel. She's convinced she was convinced she knew the way to Earth, and then she loses all hope after Earth turns out to be a wasteland. It's like, what did I come back for?
And then she finds her own body.
And then there's this whole thing where she has this kind of mystical tune that she learned on the piano from when she was a kid, and it's all along the Watchtower, right? And
it's back.
And so this is where things go completely mystical. Starbuck has this magical melody that could end up finding them a new home. Meanwhile, there's a giant battle between good and evil, good humans and good Cylons versus the bad Cylons, essentially.
Yeah, but also like the rebel rebel Cylons have joined the fleet at this point. So the base ship is now one of the ships. I love all the bits where you get the ships flying through, and you can see all the different types of ships. And there was Cloud9, which was basically the brothel ship, and there's all they're all different things. And then you've just got the base star that's got all its little points have all been broken off. That's floating along. And you got some of and there's the Galactica's falling apart, and you've got Cylons that are helping patch it up, and it's just this kind of sense of
everything's meshed.
Maybe we can all work together.
Yeah, in the existential side of things, and the existential horror of all this, it ultimately comes down to humans and Cylons need to coexist, and that the existence of a Cylon-human hybrid is key to humanity's survival. To stop Galactica from falling apart, they have to use Cylon technology to keep the Galactica together for a little bit longer. And the rebel Cylons have to team up with the humans in order for the kind of time loop to complete. And so it's interesting that as a show overall, it comes down on the side of whatever the difference is between humans and Cylons, we need each other and we need to exist together hand in hand.
And that just feels really basic, actually. But
couldn't we all just get along?
Yeah, but good. I think that's why it still resonates and why it still works. It's a really basic thesis for the whole show.
And the Galactica is utterly destroyed in this final battle. They're able to do a kind of light speed jump one more time, and the Starbuck is in control, and Adama's like, just get us out of here, jump us anywhere, put in some random coordinates. So Starbuck decides she's going to pop in the coordinates from the All Along the Watchtower tune that she knows off by heart, and wouldn't you know it, they land right on the edge of a brand new habitable planet that I guess is our Earth.
The shot of them looming over this, it looks like a barren world, and then it gradually turns out that that's the moon, and then it comes over, and you can see the continent of Africa, just the seat of where human civilization began, just looming on it. And I remember again when I saw that for the first time, I was like, "Oh, they're going to land on Earth, and they're going to meet humans." Yeah. I was not prepared for the kind of humans they were going to meet.
Yeah, so we're in Earth however many thousands of years ago, right? So
150,000 years ago.
This whole show wasn't set in the future. It's set 150,000 years in the past, right? It's a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, essentially, right? And everything comes very beautifully and neatly together at the end, right? And again, a lot of people had a real problem with this idea of Starbucks kind of Deus Ex Machina, this message from God, this mystical tune gets us to Earth after this entire journey. How do you find it, Ben? How do you find the way that this show ends?
I like it, but I get why it's controversial. I like the big swing of it's prehistoric Earth. I think at that point already, the story has run out of road a bit, and once they find prehistoric Earth, it has to really quickly wrap up all of these characters' stories. That's the thing that feels a bit rushed, and that I wish it had a little bit more space for. But I kind of loved the craziness of it. I admire it.
It's kind of satisfying. I can't help but feel very emotionally satisfied by watching all of our favorite characters, including Gaius Baltar, including some of the Cylons that are now our friends, all land on this planet and, settle there. Alex, it's kind of beautiful, isn't it?
I completely agree with Ben. I find it immensely satisfying. Even at the time, there was so much consternation about it, and I was like, I love it. And I didn't have the kind of words to be able to describe why, but it's because it was emotionally resonant and it made a lot of sense, and everybody got there. Everybody's story came to a conclusion. Everything ended.
But I also love that because then it's 150,000 years ago, and the very, very end of the show is humanity now. It throws the question onto us of this whole thing of, all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again, which I didn't realize comes from Peter Pan. That's a Peter Pan thing. Yeah, when on Disneyversity, the Disney podcast I do, we watch Peter Pan, and that comes up as a line, and I was like, oh my God, this is Battlestar Galactica. But then it throws it onto us, right? Again, this whole show has been an existential odyssey. It has always been about us and how we react to things, but it throws it into the 2009, whatever it was, here and now of, okay, if all of that happened and we're in these never-ending cycles, what choices are we going to make this time? And I like it throwing out that little existential curveball at the end.
Well, it also brings into play this idea that we are therefore descendants of humans and Cylons, right? Because this mix of human beings and Cylons landed on Earth. A human and a Cylon mated and had a baby, right? Sharon and Agathon. And so we are descendants of humans and machines. So this idea of what the show has been exploring the entire time, which is there a difference between man and machine? Is artificial intelligence just humanity? Is there such a thing as God? Or are we gods? Do we create each other and keep going through this cycle of destroying ourselves and creating ourselves and destroying ourselves and creating ourselves? It all kind of comes together perfectly at the end there, doesn't it?
At a scientific conference this week at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, the startling announcement was made that archaeologists believe they have found fossilized remains of a young woman who may actually be mitochondrial Eve. Mitochondrial Eve is the name scientists have given to the most recent common ancestor for all human beings now living on Earth. She lived in what is now Tanzania, over 150,000 years ago.
Along with her Cylon mother and human father.
Well, I've got an additional lens which will bring it back to man-made monsters.
Please.
Because this time, for the first time, the very last thing we see are Angel Boltar and Angel 6, like the people who whatever, the visions, and they're going through contemporary Earth, and they say to each other, "Oh, blah blah blah, God has a plan." Like 6 says, "God has a plan." Or one of them does, and the other one says, it doesn't like that name.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, is it all a simulation? Like, is it a simulation? This has all happened before, this will all happen again. Is it the simulation theory, we're all living in a simulation?
Ooh.
Is it that we're going to set it off and see whether they get it right this time, see whether they do it without destroying themselves?
Well, that Boltar and 6 are both extremely Matrix coded in that little code.
Exactly.
Commercialism, decadence, technology run amok. Remind you of anything?
Take your pick. Cobol. Earth. The real Earth before this one. Caprica before the fall.
All of this has happened before.
But the question remains. Does all of this have to happen again?
This time, I bet no.
I've never known you to play the optimist. Why the change of heart?
Mathematics, law of averages. Let a complex system repeat itself long enough, eventually something surprising might occur. That too is in God's plan.
It doesn't like that name.
And then we end on this kind of little dark joke, really, don't we? Where the camera pans across and we see, playing on a TV screen in a shop window, a kind of montage of news items with a kind of evolution in advancements in robotics, essentially. So we see a little tiny robot dancing, and then we see these robots start to advance. All the while, of course, All Along the Watchtower plays and Battlestar Galactica ends.
I can't get no relief.
Ben, let's finish up with this question. It's been 20 years since Battlestar Galactica. How well do you think the show holds up? Is this still worthy of being part of that conversation in the canon of kind of prestige and peak television that we got through that decade?
Massively. I mean, it has its place in that lineage for sure. But even just watching it now, it totally rips. We've spoiled the whole show here. But if you've not seen it, buy it, watch it. It is incredible. And as we said, that era of TV, not just the early peak TV stuff, but the network TV, 20 episodes, making so much out of so little and doing something as incredible as this is I loved rewatching this. I'm really glad I had an excuse to rewatch it. However many hours for a 2-hour podcast.
Oh my God, I can only thank you both for the sheer amount of hours of work that we've put into this conversation. And, it's flown past this 2 hours. I feel like, Alex, we've only scratched the surface. We didn't even get to talk about Gaius Baltar's Russell Brand cult leader phase in the 4th season.
Oh my God, the cult leader phase.
No.
We did not mention Tom Zarek once.
I know.
And he's such an incredible character.
There are so many good characters, so many incredible plot lines, so many more kind of meaty themes we didn't get to discuss. Alex, we'll just have to find a way. Should we just do a Battlestar rewatch podcast? We'll just start a podcast.
Let's do it. Let's just do it.
And then we can spend all the time we want getting into it.
Yeah. Well, we'll just keep texting each other about it. That's fine.
Exactly. We'll just voice note each other back and forth. It's fine. Alex, what about you? How well do you think this show has aged since 2003?
You said it earlier. I think it was you. Like, it's aged like a fine wine for me. It is incredible. Like, I think it's more relevant now than it was when it came out. Like, the prescience of this series, the relevance of the storyline, even before they knew where AI was going to take us, like the themes of it, I guess are tapping into the entire reason why you've done this season of the podcast. It's about technology defining what it means to be human.
Yeah, completely.
And I, like, for my money, nobody has done it better than this. Like, this for me is the peak of exploring it, because it had that breadth and that time to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's the thing by which everything else should be judged at this point. Like,
I completely agree. I've covered a lot of films that cover similar themes, whether it's Blade Runner, whether it's Ex Machina. These are all interesting, brilliant films. And in some ways, yes, this show had more time to pad it out. But I think it is the best version of this story. I think that kind of really interesting, confusing blend between man and machine and what it means to be either, and is there a difference? And are we just destined to kind of make the same mistakes over and over again when it comes to technology, religion, politics, everything? This show covers it all, right? And it does it in such a fucking entertaining way.
Absolutely. It's a joy. It's a joy to watch. Like, I loved, like, thank you for asking me to do this. I feel massively privileged to be invited back. And, like, I mean, I will say I'm very excited to now be able to watch other things. Like, all I've done. If you look at my Letterboxd, people who follow me on Letterboxd will see there's a giant gap in 2026 where every evening I've only been watching Battlestar Galactica.
I was thinking about this, Alex, you poor thing, because, like, I think in the Vampire series, we talked about the whole of Buffy and Angel.
Yeah.
In the last season, I made you watch 5 Piranha films or whatever it was. Like, I promise next season, we'll just do a film together.
I don't know what the next season is.
Oh my God, I'm going to tell you off mic.
Oh, lovely.
There you go. Guys, thank you so much. Ben, just remind people where they can come and find you and more of your work online.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. So you can find me, I'm in Empire Magazine. In fact, right now, the Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu issue is on sale. I wrote that cover feature. So if you like Star Wars, go and read that. I am online. I'm still in the bad place. I'm still on fucking X, Twitter, whatever. Ben S. Travis. I just signed up for Letterboxd. I'm finally becoming a bit of a Letterboxd
I followed
person.
you.
Thanks, Alex. Mike, I will find you. Are you on Letterboxd?
We'll find each other. We'll
find each other. I'm also Ben S. Travis on there. That's my handle everywhere. So come and find me. Let's chat about the movies.
Amazing. And Alex, where can people find you?
They can find me. I've come off all the bad places, so I'm now. I mean, there are different kinds of bad, I guess. But I'm on Instagram. You can come and find me there, or Letterboxd, both of which are Alex J. Ayling. I would love to talk to people.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Woo, and there we go. That's it for this week. What an epic discussion. A massive thank you to Ben Travis and Alex Ayling for joining me. I hope we managed to kind of navigate most of the major talking points within that 2-hour conversation. Obviously, there's going to be stuff that we missed out or that we didn't get to talk about enough. We only scratched the surface of this incredible show. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think I want to do an entire spin-off podcast about it, but that's for another time. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on Battlestar Galactica. Drop me an email, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on the socials. Of course, I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky, and the podcast Evolution of Horror is on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to get ad-free versions of this podcast, you can sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. You'll also get bonus episodes there every single week. This podcast is part of the Evolution of Horror Network. You can also listen to our sister shows, Hammer Time, which drops every Wednesday, and Carry On Up the Podcast, which drops every Monday. You can get those wherever you get your podcasts. So, on to next week then, and I don't know why I'm doing it to myself, but next week we are going to be tackling another epic TV show in its entirety. Next week I'm going to be joined by Journey Through Sci-Fi's Matt and James, and we are going to be discussing the dark dystopian world of Black Mirror. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.